Hello, welcome to Raymond Castile's basement of horror. We have a very special show today. We have 4 very special guests. This is a little different format than what you might be used to. We're going to have a panel discussion about monster kids, monster collecting, and the Halloween holiday. So let me first introduce you to my illustrious guests. We have Brian Heiler, publisher of Toy Ventures magazine and author of the book Rack Toys, Cheap, Crazed Playthings. He's the co-host of the Pod Stallions podcast, the host of the Brick Mantooth YouTube channel, the administrator of the Mego Museum, and he also is the admin for multiple toy collector Facebook groups. Below him, we have...
I've never been called illustrious before. I'm just agape.
I'm also pleased to introduce Rich Hurley, a.k.a. Dr. Durant, host of the aptly named Dr. Durant's Sanctum on YouTube, where he is constantly haunted by the ghost of Vincent Price. Dr. Durant's Sanctum can also be found on Facebook and Instagram. And finally, I'm very pleased to introduce Andy Halloween and Amy Vampi, co-hosts of the Dark Ride Dracula YouTube channel. Amy is also the administrator of the Universal Monster Collectors Facebook group. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today in my basement of horror. I'm very pleased to have you here.
I gotta ask how a kid named Halloween and a gal named Vampi met. It's just kismet.
Just fate.
It was at a Christmas function. We met at a Christmas.
It's a Halloween miracle.
How ironic.
They were at a Chamber of Commerce function.
Yeah.
It's a fancy meeting you here. We're going to start this discussion by talking about our monster kid origin stories. How did you become a monster kid? When did it happen? Were you a monster kid from birth, or was there some strange event in your life that turned you into a monster kid? And then how did you go from being a monster kid to being a monster collector? So who would like to go first? I'm going to start with... I'll start with Mr. Halloween and Mrs. Vampi.
So I grew up in New England, and in New England...
Well, your skull's about to fall.
Oh, yeah.
Which one?
We had WLVI Channel 56, which was well known for playing like Chiller Theater, and they had the old monster movies and stuff. So as a little kid, I used to watch that all the time, and I saw like a lot of the older horror movies from that. And my dad was a huge 60s pop culture collector and fan of the monsters. So when I was a little kid, he's like, oh, you got to watch the monsters and Lost in Space and the Outer Limits and all of this fun stuff and Frankenstein. And so between that and Channel 56 with Chiller Theater, it was like monster explosion.
So no one had to make you a monster kid. It just happened naturally.
Yeah, I was both blessed and cursed, because as much as I love monsters, it keeps me poor because the stuff's expensive. So it's like,
do tell.
How about you, Amy?
It started pretty early for me. When I was little, my room was kind of an offshoot of my parents' bedroom, and the door that opened up into my little room had a giant Boris Karloff Frankenstein poster, one of the door posters. And I just remember looking at that when I was little, and it scared me a little bit at first, but I kind of realized that I really liked it. I was drawn to it. And then my dad used to have this Wolfman mask that I was really terrified of. And my grandma made a story about a friendly werewolf. And that kind of helped me turn things around. But then having the monsters all around when I was a little bit older, the monsters would be on Nick at Night, and I would watch that a lot in the summer growing up, and that was another really pivotal point in that for me.
Did you say the monsters or the Munsters were on Nick at Night? Okay.
The Munsters, Monster Mondays on Nick at Night, and that was another really important.
Monster Squad.
And Monster Squad, because being born I was, it Monster Squad was one of my earlier introductions to monsters after obviously having seen some of the Universals.
So but why again was the Boris Karloff poster hanging up? Well,
my parents are, I probably missed that part, but yeah, my parents were really big into Universal Monsters. My mom was real big into sci-fi, so that influence was really, really strong. So
both of you have, it runs in the family.
yes.
Yeah.
Rich, how about you?
Well, I've loved monsters for as long as I can remember, but the very specific moment that I remember that I fell absolutely in love with monsters was in first grade when I got this book at the Scholastic Book Fair. Awesome. And this, I pored over this for days, and then it was my goal to see every single movie that was in there. And the one that really blew my mind was the description of the movie The Fly. And he tells the whole story of The Fly, and at the end, where he said that the fly had the human guy's head on the fly's body, I was like, I have to see a movie that shows this. Like, this is insane. And Andy, like you, I grew up in the New England area, and I don't mean to go all comic book guy on you, but it was Creature Double Feature that was the show in New England, and I too loved that. Every Saturday afternoon, I begged my dad not to have to do yard chores to be able to stay inside and watch those movies. They played all the old Universal classics, Godzilla, everything like that. I loved that, and I've just been in love with monsters ever since. It never ended.
I like your mask on the wall. Just kind of noticed those. Those are really cool. Very nice.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and Halloween, of course, is my favorite holiday. I mean, even since I was a kid, I love dressing up and playing monster.
A little ghost of Captain Kidd back there, too. Well, we'll have time to talk about that later. All right, now, Brian, you have quite a few things back behind you. What is your Monster Kid origin story?
I thought about it a lot over the last couple of days, and it's kind of all related to comedy, which is kind of an odd gateway. But I was young, and I was a scaredy cat, and I grew up about an hour away from where they filmed that television series, The Hilarious House of Frightenstein.
Awesome.
And there's something called Canadian content laws that you have to play a certain amount of Canadian content every day. And let's just say Frightenstein was on a lot on these channels. And I think that's my introduction to the character. And I was really fascinated by Brucey, the Frankenstein that never moved, but kids told me there was an episode where he got up, and it was technically an urban legend. He just spoke in one episode. Anyway, I'd say 76 is the point I became a monster kid because 2 or 3 things happened at once. One was my next door neighbors, the Millers. They had older kids than, when I was in kindergarten, these guys had beards. And one of them just came over and said, "Do you want all my old stuff?" And it was a big box with cracked monster magazines. Those were highly influential on me. Yeah. And then a massive stack of those 60s monster cards, the ones with the funny captions. And I hate to think what I had there. And then that year, the Monster Squad started on Saturday mornings. And also, I talked my dad my dad was a toy distributor, and I talked him into carrying the Lincoln Monsters through his business. And so, flash forward like 4 years, and you add in the Crestwood books and other things like that. And like 4 years later, like a kid would call me on a Saturday afternoon, and I would say stuff like, "Oh, I can't. The Ray is on. That is Karloff and Lugosi," and I mean, not normal, but here I am.
Well, that was me. I think the same as you. Yeah. I think all of us were probably, which explains our Victorian complexions, is that we were all inside on Saturday afternoons, avoiding the sun. That was prime monster movie time.
I'm mostly UK and German, so no, I think I just don't have any melanin. But
I'm Egyptian, so my mom was as brown as this wall, but I think I'm, as you just said, I just stay out of all my life I've stayed out of the sun, which is strange for someone whose DNA would be like a desert dwelling people. You'd think I'd love the sun, but no, I stay out of it. I'm afraid I'll turn to ash.
Yeah. Son is hurty to me.
Now, I've talked about my origin on the show, but briefly, I've loved monsters since I can remember, back like 2-3 years old. I remember seeing the creature from the Black Lagoon. I know it was well before kindergarten, so maybe preschool age. Probably, I'm just thinking 3 years old. And I was into Bigfoot and Yeti the same age. I remember watching the Hammer movies, like the CBS late movie. And they used to play a lot of the old, like late 60s, early 70s exploitation movies on independent television, virtually unedited.
Oh, yeah. Here too.
So I saw all that stuff really, like, I'm talking preschool, kindergarten age, watching all those crazy things. And
I saw a lot of blaxploitation as a kid, and now I think about it, and I'm like, why did I see that?
I saw a little bit of that. For me, it was more like, like the Al Adamson kind of stuff, and some Paul Nash. I saw that stuff too. So
I see, yeah,
and all kinds of weird things. We had a horror host, but I thought he was local. It was Seymour, like Sinister Seymour. I didn't know he was out of Los Angeles. I thought he was in St. Louis, but that was my horror host growing up in the early 70s. He was syndicated. I thought he was in a studio in St. Louis the whole time. So that was, it was organic. I grew up, my parents, they wanted nothing to do with monsters. They hated monsters.
Hello.
Yeah. My brother was sort of, we could kind of take it or leave it, but I was hardcore into monsters.
Yeah.
I can remember. So that's my Monster Kid origin. Now, so let's segue from that into collecting, because we're all collectors here. Everyone on this program collects monster toys and memorabilia, in addition to other things. Like Brian, I know you collect a lot of other stuff. And I bet a lot of people know you for like superheroes and science fiction and things like that. But I mean, you are quite a monster collector.
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite subjects. But I try to keep it to monster figures, because that way lies madness. Like once you let in, I can't even think, rubber erasers or anything like that, then it just starts to, because if they made it, they put monsters on it.
Well, how did you start collecting monsters? But maybe that's how did you start collecting in general? Did you collect where you're a generalist and then you narrowed your focus to monsters?
I have, my gateway into toy collecting was science fiction. Like I really liked Space 1999 and Doctor Who. And the first two toys I ever bought, vintage toys I ever bought, were a talking Dalek and a Space 1999 Dinky Eagle off of a classmate in grade 9. And then, yeah, I'd say by grade 10, I just admitted I wanted to collect like the Star Trek Megos, the superhero Megos. And then, hey, Mego made monsters. I bought those. I'd never actually seen the Mego monsters as a kid. And and here we are. I have a lot of various, what would you call it? Interests, I guess. It goes from, Japanese toys to monsters to superheroes, television shows. It's all over the map. I love C.B. McCall, yet I, don't really remember the toy line or have any predilection for CB movies from the 70s, but here I am. Monsters are like, I'm 5 years old when I look at monster toys.
Well, Rich, how about you? When did you go from being a monster kid to being a monster collector?
Well, the very first thing that I actually collected was comic books. I loved comic books, but I read horror comic books. The two comics I read were horror and war. And back in the early 70s, the war comics were horror adjacent, because I would read The Unknown Soldier, who was a disfigured soldier with a scarred face who would go on adventures. And I would read Weird War Tales, which were war stories with a supernatural bent, Nazi vampires, things along those lines, and House of Mystery, all that stuff. I just ate those up. And one day my dad brought home a price guide for me, a Overstreet price guide. And it had this great horror cover on it. It was like, I'm trying to think of the artist. I think it was Lee Elias that drew the cover. and it was this skull creature trying to kill a woman. And inside they talked about EC comic books. And when I read about those, I had to find out what they were, and sure enough, I did. And at that time, it was pretty pricey to buy old ECs, just as it is now, but they had reprints in these big hardcover volumes. And my dad would give me one of those volumes every Christmas. And I just fell in love with that. That was my first thing into collecting. And then, you move on, you get older, you go into college, and I went home one day because I was moving into an apartment. And I found a lot of my old monster toys. I'm like, these are cool. I'm going to put them up on my my bureau and around my dorm room and things like that. And then I was like, oh, I never had this. That would be kind of cool to find. And back then you could find cheap stuff like that at comic book stores or antique stores and things like that. And then I'm like, oh, I never had this either. Like, it snowballed into what you're looking at now. And I think like Brian and probably Andy and Amy, is it just you start finding out about different things that existed that you never even knew about. I had no idea about Lincoln Monsters. They just never appeared in my neck of the woods. And then Brian talked about them, I think, at one point on his his channel and all of our stuff. And I'm like, these are amazing. I gotta track these down. You
discovered them through Brian's channel?
Well, that's why I'm sure I might have seen them before in something else, but he was the one that really talked them up that I found out about through.
Wow, I didn't know that
stuff. So it's it's again, it's like the pre-internet days. There was no way to really find out about this stuff other than going to conventions and talking to other collectors and seeing something there. I mean, they didn't even have, I go as far back as that they really didn't even have magazines out then geared towards collectors, unless you're looking in the back of Famous Monsters magazine or Fangoria or something along those lines. So
there was a bookstore in Queen Street in the 80s called Another Man's Poison that had collector books. And I remember going in there all the time, and the action figure collector books were always just called Celebrity Dolls. And, you'd go through it and it'd be a picture of like Amigo Batman and it would say Adam West. Like that was, that was the peak of information at the time.
And I bought toys far older than I should have been buying toys. So in other words, I was like 13 and 14 and I remember I got Skeletor when he came out because he was a skeleton.
You weren't buying toys that were old. You were buying toys for longer than you would expect.
Yeah, and then I remember my friends came over and they were like, "Hey, man, why do you have these He-Man dolls?" And I was like, "Oh, but my grandma's really old. She gave me these for my birthday. She forgot how old I am." I was embarrassed to say that I liked toys still. And
I have a story like that. I'll get to that in a minute. But let's hear from Andy and Amy. How did you start? How did you go from being monster kids, monster enthusiasts, monster fans to actually collecting monster stuff?
I think I always just collected monster stuff.
Your dad was a collector too.
My dad always collected toys, so I would.
That's an important point.
Oh wow, yeah.
Get taken to like Chiller Theater and all the toy conventions that would go on. And as a little kid, I met like the Lost Space cast, and so it was like I was always around that. So fortunately, I grew up in an area up in New England. They had closeout stores, which I'm sure everybody did, had the discount racks. And my dad would take me in because he collected toys too. So, things that were $2 for $1 off the rack. I remember seeing the Remco monsters way years after they came out. Even into the 90s, there were places up north like Building 19 and Job Lot. There were these stores that you could find, those Remco monsters for $2 for $1.
Yeah, I found a Remco Wolfman on the Canadian card, ironically the one I need, for $1 at The Simpsons when I was in college, and that would have been 91.
Yeah,
so you're absolutely right.
Andy, do you remember King's Castle Land?
Was that in Seekonk?
It was down on the South Shore somewhere. It was sort of a mini park, but they walked you out through a big sort of mini Child World type store. It was called King's Castle Toyland. They were selling monsters well past their expiration date. Like they were on the shelves. And I remember making my dad take me there, and he's like, "Why are we going here? This is like a kiddie park." And I'm like, "Oh,
"Wait in the car."
And then I'm like, Because my parents were divorced, so my dad was always good for a toy or a comic book on the weekends because he had that guilty divorced dad syndrome. And it was just I can remember I got Remco's there. They still have like the Enterprise playset on the shelf. I got all my Mego monsters there. I was just wondering if you remembered it because it was an amazing place.
I don't remember that, but there was a place in Attleboro, Massachusetts called Kidstown, and Kidstown used to get like all the the closeout stuff, and my dad would say that's where I saw like Mego, Hulk, and Spider-Man. They were $2 for $1, so my father would say, "Yeah, you can get both. It's fine." So I wound up with all these toys that I really were way past their expiration date. So I always had like cool monster toys, and because it was in the closeout cheap section, I got to get all of this stuff, and I just kept it and set it up and thought it was cool. So I never stopped. I never transferred from being a little kid into monsters to collecting. I just always picked it up as I saw it and just thought it was neat. Monsters were everywhere at the time. All the dark rides had monsters on the cars and the magazines and the shows, Tales from the Crypt, and it was just always monsters 24/7. So it was never I didn't buy that stuff.
Yeah, I want to get back to the kind of that early 90s theme in a second, but let's hear from Amy about how did you start collecting?
Now, sadly, that's where we differ. My parents didn't collect anything. So I was kind of I always wanted to collect stuff, but they were like, no, we're not going to clutter things up. And of course, that just really fueled the fire for later on. So then it's like, oh, I can't do that. Of course, when I'm adult, now I'm going to do it. The first time that I really started collecting monsters, I started off, my main obsession in the beginning was the posters. The artwork is what really like took things to the next level for me because I was an art major.
The movie posters?
Yeah. That was my main obsession, but obviously they're a little out of reach. Now we collect a lot of the AIP monster movie posters, which are much more attainable, luckily. But I was really drawn to the artwork, but then I was always going to horror conventions, like Chiller Theater and the Monster Manias and stuff like that. And there would be dealers there who would have monster toys. And it all started with a little glow Remco creature, 3 3/4, and it started a monster, so to speak. And it's been broke ever since.
Well,
it's
I started
good broke.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's any such thing as a good broke, but
well, it's better than with a bunch of like racing bets that didn't go anywhere. At least you have the toy.
Exactly. It's better than crying at the blackjack table. Like,
well, that's the thing. I mean, I some people go broke and they don't have anything to show for it. Or at least we have this stuff. I mean, theoretically, we could sell it. Theoretically.
Well, it's not as liquid as we think.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as far as my experience collecting, I also, I stopped playing with toys as a child. By the time I was 13, I wasn't playing with toys anymore. And then in my teenage years, like high school, going to college, some interesting things start popping up in stores, like the Boglins and the Old Lantern family, and some like toys for R-rated movies kind of surprised me, like RoboCop toys, even though I know they were based on a cartoon. But still, after the big flap over the Alien figure a few years ago, like at that time, I thought, wow, that's really brave to come out with these R-rated figures. So I was starting to notice toys again as a teenager and buying some toys. Like I bought some Boglins, bought a Lantern family pumpkins just because I thought they were cool. I just put them in my room. Then I think I have to say it was probably Doctor Who that got me into collecting, because I went to a comic book store to buy Doctor Who stuff. I was into Doctor Who. I had a scarf, all that. And I was going to buy some Doctor Who toys. And then the proprietor said, "Oh, so you like toys, huh? Come into this back room," which could have ended tragically.
Should have been a red flag.
Young man, do you like toys?
Come into this back room.
Yeah. What's the worst?
He led me into his back room.
Why is there plastic sheets all over the floor? Oh no!
He would have said, like, I found a toy just now. You're going to be my favorite toy.
I saw that different strokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
You like
special.
Doctor Who? How do you feel about Tarzan?
So he led me into the back room, and there he had just all kinds of mint and packaged toys. He had a whole wall of carded Star Wars figures, like from the 12 backs all the way through, but like hundreds of them, just packed. And like a retail store would have it, just peg hooks full of it. And he had stuff I didn't even really know what it was. He had like Captain Action, all the boxed costumes. He had a bunch of boxed Mego superheroes, just dozens and dozens. He had the Remco monsters. I think he might have had one Azrak Hamway, but it was opened. But at least I recognized what that was from my childhood. And of course, I grew up as I was playing with, not just liking monsters, but playing with monster toys as a child. And my favorite toys were always the monster toys. But he had the boxed Remco monsters. He had, you name it. He had I don't even know what this collection would cost in today's dollars. This would be like $1 million collection. And it was all in this back room of this comic book shop. And I just was so surprised. Like, how are these things still in packages? What's going on? I thought, you buy a toy, you open it, you play with it, it falls apart, you dispose of it. And then if you sell it, it's like a garage sale. You sell it for $0.25 or $1. So I had no concept of saving a toy, keeping it mint in a package, and then that the value would appreciate instead of depreciate. So he explained to me in a couple of hours what toy collecting was. He said, well, I collect these. I'm a toy collector. And he told me all about it. He told me about Toy Shop magazine. He told me about toy shows. And my brother really liked Captain America, and he had a box Mego Captain America. And I said, well, I might buy that for my brother. He likes Captain America. How much is that? And it was, some big price. And I said, why is that so much money? It's old. And again, he explained. And I said, well, I'll find it some other place. And he said, well, no, this is very rare. You won't be able to find that. And so I left there thinking, I'm going to find that Captain America. I eventually actually accumulated a pretty big Mego collection. I never did give my brother a Captain America. I kept it for myself, but I did eventually. I had a really massive Mego collection, but it started with that trip to that comic book store, and then I became kind of a generalist. When I get on something new, I kind of go crazy with it. I want to know everything about it. I go whole hog with it, whether it's toys or music or filmmaking or just whatever my new interest is. I get obsessed with it. And at some point I realized I can't have everything. I can't collect everything. What do I really love? I need to focus on that. And I said, I really love monsters. That's my thing. So I sold everything that wasn't a monster, and I used the money to buy monster toys. And from that day forward, this is early 90s, I just collected monsters. And I tried to be strict with it. If I saw a toy that wasn't a monster, I thought, well, this is really cool. I said, no, this is not a monster. And I think overall that was a good decision. I think I would have gone just nuts if I had kept collecting a broader array of things. I focused very squarely on just monster stuff. And so that's where I am today. Now,
well, I did you well, and that's something that took me a long time to learn. I was just like a Tommy gun, just shooting everywhere I could, buying anything I could.
Yes, that was me.
And it took me until my 30s to go, I really want X. And if I sell all this Y, I can buy the X. And, it's done me well, although I got to admit it, I'm kind of going back into the Y phase in here. So,
well, this will kind of segue into our next topic, because back when I started, you could buy, I remember like in Toy Shop magazine, a boxed Mego Penguin, I remember was like $25.
Oh, yeah.
Like a Mexelplick, whatever his name is, was like $15. And I remember paying $20, $30 for a carded Human Torch. And
yeah, the pin cards. Yeah.
And as you guys were saying earlier, there were stores where you could find this stuff on closeout. Like in my area, it was Children's Palace, where you could just go shopping for collectibles. You could find, like I remember, the Kenner Raiders of the Lost Ark toys.
Oh yeah.
Well, they were not all of them. They were there. They had just rows of the Stallion. And I could just buy them for a couple of bucks each. They had like carded Mego Spider-Man. I never saw a Hulk, but I'm sure that was, if I had gone to enough stores, I would have found a Hulk probably. A lot of 80s and even some 70s stuff could be found still in the box, of course, unbought stock in the clearance aisles of Children's Palace. And it was just like retail shopping for collectible toys that were already collectible at that time, but you could get them for a couple of bucks each. And I heard that there were even some Lincoln Monsters at one of those Children's Palace stores. I didn't get there in time for that, but through the grapevine, I heard some had turned up. So that was quite a time. So what were your experiences? You were already kind of touching on it. When you started collecting, what was the collecting scene like at that time? For me, it was, let's say, early 90s, and a lot of things were still cheap, and you could be a generalist. And everything was done through Toy Shop magazine or a toy show, or having to call people long distance. You had to pay the long distance fee, so I would rack up $100 on a phone call. Yeah.
Actually, I got in trouble with my parents for a lot of like Mark Huckabone 2-hour phone calls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was when we were in high school, and we were like talking about girls we liked. Like
you never talked to me about girls.
No, but I mean, we were both two 16-year-old kids who collected toys and kept it on the DL at school, so that's kind of where we bonded a little bit. I'll just talk about the collector scene in Toronto in the 80s. Die-cast cars and dolls were the big thing. There was a huge collector scene in Toronto, but it's kind of follows what was popular in England. And it was a lot of, like the Canadian Toy Collector Society, who still has shows every year. And I'm actually going to be at the next one. They still do like their own celebratory die-cast for every show. So when I started toy collecting at that time, I would look under the tables and pull out like Romulans and, all the stuff I was looking for was on the bottom. And I've watched toy shows go from like the stuff I was looking for at the bottom, and then went on the table, and now it's behind glass. And the stuff that was rotting in Toys R Us in the early 90s is now behind glass.
I know.
So it's a really weird place to be when there's like, they're redoing like the Toy Biz Batman movie line right now. And it's just like, oh God, I feel like I've just been on it's time for me to graduate high school. I feel like Van Wilder.
I haven't seen these. They're reissuing the Toy Biz Batman stuff.
Yeah, they're making a new Bob the Goon figure. That's the age we live in.
Wow. Yeah, I remember Bob the Goons by the hundreds.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, because everyone wanted Batman. He seemed like for some reason, he was in short supply. You would think it would make more Batmans than anything else, and then Joker was the next one to sell, and then you were left with just
Wall of Bob.
Yeah.
So, like you, Ray, I never stopped venturing into Toys R Us or toy stores or the toy section of any store I went into, no matter what age I was. And I would pick up little things like the Ghostbuster toys, like the monsters, not the characters. Or I'd see like, oh my God, they have an Arnold Schwarzenegger Commando figure. Like I need to have that, just because I thought it was a cool conversation piece. And I remember I
had that too, the big one.
Yeah. I was working at Tower Records, and there was a guy, him and I became roommates. He went to Berklee School of Music. He was a guitar player. And I remember one day he came into work and he said, I think I'm rooming with a 12-year-old boy, because like he saw my room was just decked out with like toys and everything. And I was like heartbroken. I was so embarrassed. But then there was another guy at Tower Records, this big hulking guy that was like a bouncer on the weekends at the Rathskeller. And he was like, you collect toys? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, me too. And like, and then we became like the best of friends. And every weekend we'd just be hitting KB Toys, going to comic book stores. If conventions were in town, we go to conventions and pick stuff up. And that was going well. That was in the early 90s when I think that was when I think toy collecting, probably just due to the age of the people that were collecting toys, were starting to get a little bit more disposable income per se. They were graduating college.
Was there sort of a generation, a toy collector generation? It seemed like there was a perfect storm in that late 80s, early 90s period where the toy collecting then was not like toy collecting 5 or 10 years prior any time. Something happened there.
Yeah, I think I think that the biggest thing that happened was toy companies started to realize people pay big bucks for this stuff. Remember that Target G.I. Joe that came out in like 91 and people were lining up around the corner for that? I always felt like, to me, I was a fan of a band that just like released their Black album. I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? Like they're going to be huge now. And I noticed that shift immediately. By 2 years later, you'd walk into a show and people would have lists looking for the variants of every figure made. And that didn't happen in the 80s. So I found that shift, like Rich said, was the early 90s. I view the Joe thing as a catalyst, but probably sure there's other things.
Yeah, and you started to learn, like, the word would go around, like, you got to get that figure because that figure is short packed in the box, so it's going to be worth more. The infamous one I remember is hamburger head spawn, where everybody was like, you got to find the hamburger head spawn because that's the rarest one to get, and people will be searching for that.
During that period, I was like in college, and I was really interested in vintage. So I would go like every day to stores and buy the short pack figures, bring them to the Toronto Toy Show for like $5 more than I paid for them, and just get rid of them because it was like a way to justify the table just to get in early at the show. But that stuff was really, really popular.
How about you two, Andy, Amy? You're a little bit of a different era, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. One of my first jobs was working for Toys R Us, and so I saw a different side of it. Like I had always picked up monsters and toys and stuff because I thought they were cool. I didn't learn about the rabid fan base of people who would stand in line for 7 hours to get treasure hunt Hot Wheels cars until I worked for Toys R Us. And then I'd see people outside in the wintertime during Christmas season, like this, freezing, like, waiting in line. And then I'd come out of work, hey, you get any of them treasure hunts? You put any of them treasure hunts out? Like, what is this treasure hunts? And then the Johnny White Lightnings and the, like Rich was saying with the short pack figures. I learned really quickly that toy collector, like there was a whole world out there of people who would do anything to get their hands on the rare toys so I didn't know at first. I thought everything was, if there's a case of 12 figures, it's all the same thing. I didn't learn about short packs and special editions and metallic figures and all this stuff until working for Toys R Us. And then it was like, wow, there's a whole world out there and there's a lot of money to be made this way. So this is a great job to have.
So by job, mean dealing in collectible toys? Is that the job you're talking about, or the job at Toys R Us?
Oh, I started working for Toys R Us just as a seasonal job, but it quickly became a dealing in toys situation. Once people would come up to me after I'd be getting out of work saying, hey, if you can get your hands on some treasure hunts for me, I'll give you X amount of money. Or
Hot Wheels guys are kind of like ruthless.
They still are. They still are.
When my kid was like 2, he was really interested in, toy cars, and I put him in the Hot Wheel aisle. And I remember a guy actually pushed him out of the way in front of me. That didn't end well. But it was like, what the hell? He's 2,
I worked at Target, starting, I guess, midway through college until a couple years after college. So right there, when I started toy collecting, it was just hitting right at the right time. And I think that did help me get a handle on the contemporary world of toys, because I I started toy collecting more into the vintage stuff, exposed to the vintage Migos and the vintage monsters and vintage everything. So I think working at I worked in the toy department at Target, of course. And that really gave me a firsthand perspective on what was coming out and how it was distributed, just like you were saying about how they were packed in the boxes. And I tried not to take advantage of that too much. I mean, first of all, the managers didn't want the people working in the department to be buying up all the toys themselves. But I just didn't, I had a problem with that. I thought that wouldn't be right for me to do that. But I did buy, if I wanted something, like one of each. But I started to become kind of a toy justice warrior, because I would take for a good example would be like April O'Neil. There was a year where April O'Neil, I think it was the first one had no stripes, which I had her. And then there was one with blue stripes. And I think that's when, to the general public, it started kind of blew up. And everyone was looking for April O'Neil, but they were all, dealers, people want to sell it. And I took one and put it in the back one Christmas. And I said, I just know there's like the right person is going to come along, and I'm going to let them have this April O'Neil. So for a couple of weeks, I hid this April O'Neil. And no one could find it. And everyone kept asking, do you have April O'Neil? I said, no. And it was like the day before Christmas or something. And this mom came in, and she was a mom. She was buying stuff for her kids. And she came up to me like, I know it's a stupid question. I shouldn't even ask it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Do you have an April O'Neil figure? And I said, let me check. And I went
in the back.
The infamous.
I said, look what I found. And she was like, like that. And she grabbed it. I bet she still remembers that.
Yeah. That's that wonderful store clerk who looked at the back.
And I still remember it. So I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing for me to do that, but
it was a good thing.
That's a toy store miracle. Yes, everybody needs that. Like
my first gig was I was a sales rep, and I had to go to every Zeller's department store in Toronto and service their needs once a week. So I had a friend who had a comic book store called the Comic Post, and he was just one of those, like, he was a loyalty guy. So if there was a rare, short pack figure, he'd ask me to look out for them. I would buy them if I saw them, and then he would sell them for exactly what he paid to customers, because he didn't want to scalp. He wanted people to come to his store. And it was actually really cool. He put them right on the shelf, the same price he paid. And I always kind of felt that was a nice service he was doing. And also I liked an excuse to visit his store once a week. So
that's awesome.
I remember going to comic book shops as well. That's something I forgot about. That it wasn't just Toy Shop Magazine or the toy shows or talking to Mark Huckabone. It was also comic book shops where you could get all kinds. One of the first things I collected was Secret Wars. And I had everything Secret Wars. I had the 3 European ones, everything metal card. I was so proud of my little Secret Wars collection. And it was all from comic book shops and a lot of the easier to find Migos. And I had a lot of vinyl Japanese monsters and stuff. So toy shops were an important part of my early collecting. Amy and Andy, so was Toy Shop Magazine still a thing when you came along in your early years?
I didn't, unfortunately, have any idea until I was older. Unfortunately, this is where being younger sucks.
I did. I had because my dad was a toy collector, so he would always order things out of the back of Toy Shop, which I always thought was crazy. He'd be sending money orders in the mail for stuff, and I'm like, how do you know it's not sold out? He's like, you have to take the shot. You have to take the shot, And so he would send away for things and then wait weeks for them to come in the mail. Days. That's crazy talk.
Even crazier with phone auctions. Did your dad do those?
Yeah, he was a toy shop
bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know. Collected that way, but we had the comic book stores and the conventions and stuff too. But he'd see pictures, and in toy shop, it'd be this picture that's microscopic. He'd be like, "Yeah, that's the one I need right there." And I'm like, "How do you know that picture's the size of a stamp?" He's like, "No, that's the one I got to get. Got to send away for that one."
Of course, people on eBay now, they want 12 photos from every angle, and if you miss an angle,
And even then, it's not enough.
And today's newspaper.
Yeah, exactly.
I never did any of the toy shop magazine or the phone auctions or anything like that. I was strictly out in the wild hunter, comic book stores, toy stores, flea markets, garage sales, things like that. But then it was like, I always likened toy collectors to, like I said, like a secret sect of monks that you gather information from each toy collector you meet and you learn different things. Like I said earlier,
Yeah.
Lincoln Monsters just never appeared. Maybe it's just because they weren't sold in the Northeast. I don't know, Andy. Did you ever see them when you were a kid? Maybe your dad did because he was a big collector. But I've never heard of Lincoln
Well,
Monsters.
Wards carried them. So if you had Monkey Wards, they at least had them.
Yeah, because
I don't know for how long, but
we had AHI, we had Tomland, and we had Mego for sure, and Remco definitely. But those ones I just never popped up, and maybe they did in little discount shops, places. But I just never seen them.
I never saw a Tomland figure as a kid, but I have found them at yard sales and that sort of thing. So they did sell here, but you know, and then sometimes you just miss stuff.
Yeah, well, you'd pick up this information from a comic book shop owner like you did, Ray, where we'd say, "Hey, look at this, all mint on." Card. This is what people collect, and you learn this information. You sort of just keep it in your memory banks because we didn't even have the computers back then or the internet, and that's how you sort of learned about collecting all this stuff. It was kind of interesting. But then you had Toy Fair magazine, and there was all sorts of toy magazines on the shelves. After the big '90s toy collecting boom,
like Action Figure News, and Toy View, and Tomart's Guide. And stuff.
I actually remember Lenny came to town with that magazine, the first issue, and it was just like, it was mind blowing. And I think around that same time, Tomart's released that book. Do you remember that first hardcover book Tomart's came out with? That was like how the Comic Buyer's Guide or whatever the Comic Price Guide was when you were like 9, because you saw all those back issues, like. You're going through that book going, I never saw this. I've never heard of this. That was an amazing. I still have mine. It's terrible shape.
Were those the ones that were in multiple volumes? They did.
Later on, they turned it into a 3-book series because it just got too big for hardcover. But yeah, I mean, that is, I think, 1991 was the first time I ever saw Lincoln Mr. Rock. And,
in person?
On ever. I'd never heard of it until I saw that figure in the Tomart book. And,
well, I remember that Tomart book because I worked on it, and I did a kind of like Brian, like I did with your Ezra Hammer issue. I did a lot of photography for the monster stuff in that book, and Lenny had me doing monster articles for some of his magazines, so I was involved. Well, I would actually get a byline with Lenny, but Tom Tumbush, I didn't get any bylines with him, but I was certainly involved with some of that early stuff.
I had a Big Jim article rejected by a publisher in the late '80s. That was like the first time I ever tried to do that sort of thing. But
damn it, the world needs to know about Big Jim.
Yeah,
you won't suppress this story.
Well,
I'll go to every toy magazine in town.
I'll be back.
I look back and think, so here I was writing articles and stuff, and then I made that video, In Love with Toys, and I was thinking, how long had I been collecting? So I was collecting for like maybe 4 years when I did the first article, and then 5 or 6 years when I started working on the video. So why did I think that just a couple of years into collecting, I had any business writing articles or doing documentaries or whatever? Because I feel like even now, I still sometimes get a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't really know what I'm talking about after 30 something years. But back then, I guess I was cockier then. I just thought, I just started collecting. It's time to write an article about this stuff.
Yeah, but were you sharing the knowledge so that people could have this knowledge to collect things, or were you sharing the knowledge to be like this is what I know, and I am now the gatekeeper of this knowledge. It's
I think I was just excited about, because and this is sort of like a then and now kind of a thing. Monster collecting was not, even within the world of collecting, was not mainstream.
yep.
If you collected toys, you collected like G.I. Joe, maybe Mego, and there were still a lot of collectors that were saying if it's not a steel Jeep or a pickup truck, or if it's not wood, then it's not a real toy. They didn't want all that plastic stuff. So we had that older group. But even the ones who liked action figures, they looked down on monster stuff. And even the ones who collected the monster stuff, it had to be 60s.
Oh yeah, no, I felt that a lot from collecting Mego superheroes, and the Captain Action guys would go, take your crap, and it's like, you know what? It's all technically crap, just because it's the era you grew up in.
Well, no, I think so. Brian and Rich, I think we're all kind of same era, but I want to hear more, particularly Amy. You're probably the youngest one here, right? Right? I think so. Yeah. So tell me more about the era when you started collecting and what that was like, and compare it. How many years have you been collecting?
It's probably been about like 15 years now.
That's a good long time. So
Yeah,
tell me about.
Yeah, I mean, like it didn't really. It really ramped up probably in like, I'd say like 2016 is when it really kind of went to the next level. It was fairly casual before then, where I had a lot of friends that were toy dealers, so they would come across stuff a lot. So I would get decent discounts on stuff, and that's where I started picking up like the 3 3/4 inch Remcos, getting them loose, then starting to get them carded. Then I want the 12-inch ones, and I want the and then I found out about the HIs, and I'm like, okay, I need those, and it kept leveling up from there. And then
how did you find out about the HIs?
Just having friends that were toy dealers, mostly. Just kind of diving just headfirst into the collecting scene, and having friends that were collectors, and like they would have like the toy magazine, or the old like the toy magazines, the collectors books and stuff like that, and that's where I saw a lot of the stuff. And in the beginning, I just thought that a lot of it was just so unattainable. It was a really overwhelming in the beginning, because obviously I'm very late to the party with collecting. I didn't have the opportunity to pretty much ever see any of this stuff in a store. When I was a kid, like I loved like little like rack toy monster type stuff, but it was all, nothing that's necessarily collectible nowadays. But just I always kind of had a knack for
Not
that.
yet.
And I just
Not yet.
yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, there's gonna become a time where I start to see stuff like weird little junk toys that I picked up at KB, just because it's like, it's cheap, go ahead, grab them, So
Stuff at KB, that's already
yeah,
collectible.
and I forget how.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to everyone around me having so many years on me with collecting. But
Well, that's interesting, because like I did when I was a little kid. I had a Lincoln Mummy that was very beloved, and I had all the Azrac monsters, and the Tomland monsters were some of the first things I bought with my own money, because I got allowance, and they were at Kmart for 99 cents each. And I think I had just enough money. My parents bought me a Yeti for my birthday, and I had like $3 or maybe $4, and I was able to buy the Fly, the Cyclops, the Morlock with my own money. So I remember that day. I think that was the first time I bought a toy with my own money. 3 of them. So that was a part of my childhood. I saw that stuff. I played with that stuff. That's part of why I collect that stuff, because I have those memories, those childhood memories. So I'm fascinated by someone who did not grow up with that stuff, but I think you nevertheless, you seem like you do have an emotional connection to those things. Am I wrong?
like I wish I grew up in that time, and I think that's why I have, it's a longing for a time that I didn't get to experience. Because I mean, the time I grew up in was okay. I mean, I feel lucky enough that I was still part of a generation that still went trick or treating, and there was still a nostalgia, there was still a pop culture in the time that I grew up that I feel like is really lacking with the current generation.
Amy, so even in 15 years, though, you've seen some things change. And of course, Brian and Rich and I, we can talk about how things change, but we've got this, we're so ancient that,
What?
we were still riding dinosaurs to work when we started collecting.
I have a portrait of myself up in the attic that looks terrible.
Yeah, I would slide down the brontosaurus's tail and end up in the house. But you got a little shorter time span. So how have things changed? Let's talk.
Depends on which way you want to look at that time span, Ray.
It could be how things change with collecting, or like you were starting to talk about more like the culture. Whatever impresses you the most. How have things changed in the time that you've been collecting?
Even just the prices of things since I started collecting, and now when I started collecting, I was saying like, wow, this is pretty crazy, but I see what stuff is going for, like especially right after the pandemic, how the prices of so many things that I was collecting had just completely skyrocketed, and I was like, I am so glad that I bought that stuff when I did. Like I thought it was a lot when I bought it, but it was nowhere near when it peaked during the pandemic. So I mean, even like stuff that, something I would get for $100 would now, it's like $300-$400 depending on the edition. And it's just, I mean, that's changed a lot. I feel like too, in the last couple of years, so many more people have gotten into monsters that it's almost a little trendy now. And I feel like that's really driven up the market as well, because a lot of people that weren't in the circle collecting, that maybe have a little bit more money than people that were there previously, I feel like a lot more people are, now there's more people bidding on these things. There's more people driving the desire for these, and the price is going up. And it's some things, there's just not a lot of them out there. And, only so many come up for sale. So
I could take everything that you just said and transpose it to the 90s or the early 2000s. I think what you're saying is kind of universal in that the same cycles repeat. Mm-hmm. What you experienced, I've experienced. Like when I started collecting, I was just saying how cheap stuff was. Like my first carded Lincoln Monsters would be $90. And I remember when I finally had to crack $200 on the Lincoln Phantom. This was a carded one. I said, $200? How am I going to continue collecting? I can't pay this kind of price.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? To your point, Ray, what it is you just, the more miles you get on you, the more stories and experiences you have. And yeah, you will eventually get to that point where we've all been, where you see something and you're like, $200. Those were just like hanging at KB for years. Give me a break. Bugmen of Insecta, interchangeables. That stuff's like expensive now, but nobody wanted it when we were young,
I got those at Children's Palace. Bugmen. Also Nightmare Warriors, the skeleton guys.
Those are awesome.
The Toy Biz toys are coming back now. Like they used to piles of them at KB, like piles and piles of, and I'd be like, and even then I was like, these are garbage. Like I don't want these. Like I'm like, it's cool they're making different versions of Wolverine or whatever, but I don't want any of these.
There was a She-Hulk that was just a Xena, like blown up and painted green, but it was like green Lucy Lawless, and I used to we'd laugh at it every time we went to KB. But that's probably, I don't want to know what that's worth now.
But I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say, do you miss anything about the way collecting used to be? Or let's focus on just collecting, not so much monsters, just collecting. Do you miss anything about the way the hobby was? Pick your era, whatever. If there was like a golden era for you, do you miss anything about it?
I've got it. I would say the early 2000s, internet forums. You had these areas where it was like a hub. You could get reactions, talk to people, and do a lot of amazing deals, form friendships, those kind of things. I still have friends from people I've talked to in the 90s, and but the thing that sort of separated it now is it's all one social network. You get to know too much about people these days, I find. and it makes it complicated. Also, there's no one-stop shop. There's like 5 million groups for toys now, and it's really super disconnected and divided, and so I really miss those days because those were really fun. Like forums were fun and networking. So that would be my guess of era where I thought like we really had this down.
And I know Brian and Rich and Amy and myself, we all are admins of Facebook groups. And now, Andy, do you do anything like that?
No, I can only take so much social media.
So yes, so we've got guys from that, and I used to be an admin of the Universal Monster Army. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah,
Discussion forum.
Sure,
yeah. So that was it certainly felt, people talk about social media. It felt more social back then. This almost feels today like a kind of fast food social media. It's not as intimate. I think it is harder to make friendships. I think you could make a friendship online back then more easily. Now I think you could be introduced to someone, but I feel like if you're going to form a friendship, it's going to happen offline. You might come in contact with them on Facebook, but I think it's hard to be like buddies with people you only know through Facebook. Whereas back in the forum days, I did feel like I was like buddies with people that I only knew through the forums, but we might see each other at a show once a year or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was always behind the 8-ball with technology. So I wasn't in the forums. I got a cell phone very late in the game. I got a computer very late in the game. I was like the Battlestar Galactica. I was not hooked into technology. I was roaming around. I would like go do Craigslist ads. I would go to people's houses, get collections, things like that. Like Brian said, it was the early to mid 2000s that was probably the prime time for me for collecting. But I didn't get involved in the forums until like Facebook really came along, and then I started getting involved in the groups. And I think social media, as anyone will tell you, is a blessing and a curse. You went to high school with people, and in the old days, you would never see those people again or know what became of them. But now you know everything they've had for lunch and every political ideology they have in their brain or whatever it is, because they're espousing all these thoughts.
Yeah, and it's like we were in grade 5 together, dude. Like I couldn't have made that kind of impact on you.
But at the same time, I have met all of you via social media. Now, I don't know,
I get that.
Consider ourselves friends or anything like that, but I consider you at least people that I enjoy speaking with. We've all had conversations.
We're all people that
private
you're
messenger
where we
discussing
exist.
things. Yeah, exactly. And so you're finding like-minded people like yourself.
Amy has popped out of existence.
Yeah, amongst the dregs of the earth, you're also finding a few diamonds, if you want to say, in the rough. And so it's like I said, it has its pluses and its minuses. Of course, I think the collecting field now, amongst all the things that you said, Ray and Amy and Brian as well, is you've got now everybody thinks everything they have is worth $1 million because it's old. So it's harder to find reasonably priced items, or if you're trying to buy something, people think you're a flipper and you want to buy it because you want to flip it. And I'm like, I want to buy it because I want to.
We could talk for an hour about what's wrong with collecting. I don't want to get that.
Actually, I don't think we could ever stop. Yeah, that would, and we're not going to fix anything. Oh.
And to your point, Ray, earlier you said about do you just collect things that you loved as a kid? And of course, I think we all do, because you want to recapture that feeling. But Amy is collecting things that she never had as a kid, and
which I find interesting.
I do that too, and that would go back to the same reason people collect antiques. They want something from that time period. There's something from that period that speaks to them. There's something there that touches them. We grew up on syndicated TV, so we were forged in a lot of the baby boomer stuff. Brian, Andy to some degree too, I imagine, and you, Ray, where we saw all those TV shows, all those movies on TV, and so we sort of were we have this mismatch of pop culture that came at us as kids.
It's a storm that I don't think that anyone will ever have quite the same again. Like, you're right, TV reruns of something that didn't exist 20 years previous or, before that. That's a good point.
Right. And you'd be watching this stuff and of course the baby boomers at that time were getting their disposable income. So you go to the collectible shows and it was all stuff geared towards baby boomers. And I'd be seeing it and being like, wow, I really like that Man from Uncle thing. That looks really cool. Or, The Outer Limits. I loved The Outer Limits. The Outer Limits was never in syndication in my area because it only lasted 2 seasons. Once in a while they would show an episode here or there, but it was like a holy grail to track down and see episodes of The OuterLimits because I had heard about them or read about them in Stephen King's Danse Macabre.
You're talking about like before home video, or
even eventually they came out on home video, but in the early days of home video, and then that's a good point. Home video came along, and we could see all these movies. That was another thing to hunt down. I would go to every video store I could to find whatever exploitation film I could find, whatever, horror film I've been dying to see my whole life, because we were at the mercy of whatever the syndicated stations would play for us to watch. So,
well, when I was a kid, I was thinking, I talked to you guys about this, I think, online a few days ago. When I was a kid, the classic monsters were marketable. They were like the He-Man, the Turtles, the Power Rangers, the in thing of their time for a minute there. And like stuff like this breakfast cereal, the General Mills, Count Chocula, Frankenberry. Why would they put those Frankenstein Dracula monsters on breakfast cereal? Because that's, if you wanted to sell the kids, that's what you did. That was the popular thing. But and I wasn't even aware of it when I was a kid. All the stuff that I loved at that point was, gosh, some cases 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like the youngest stuff would have been at least 20, but some of it was like 40 years old. And I didn't have any sense that it was old. I don't think that registered. I didn't say, oh, look at these old movies I'm watching.
Right.
I don't remember having any sense of time, because I would watch like The Creature from the Black Lagoon or Bela Lugosi's Dracula from 1931. And then I'd have my Dracula action figure that I bought, or my parents bought last week. And I'd have my Count Chocula cereal. And so what's old about it? It's today. It's new. It's right now. It all felt very current. So I think, like Andy and Amy, a lot of this stuff that you were saying, it was kind of before your time, but I still had a connection to things that happened before my time. So what was it like for you being younger, growing up in a period where some of the stuff I think that you really like now had already passed? Did it feel like a current thing, or how would your connection be different to that stuff?
I think one thing is that monsters have always kind of been timeless for the most part. They always had new life breathed into them throughout different time periods. I can remember being a little kid and seeing like the Count Chocula commercial on TV, and it had Bela Lugosi in the commercial. So to me, that's brand new. It's a brand new cereal I can go in the store and buy. So I didn't realize that this stuff is even old if it's still on TV and I can still watch Creature double feature. And to me, it's like I don't realize that what I'm watching is old or reruns or anything. To me, it's like a fresh, brand new thing. And so I didn't realize that stuff was old until I was an adult. I thought, as a kid, I just thought this was, monsters are cool and they're everywhere.
Yeah, I just think kind of part of, I grew up with them, so I just thought it was just part of, I guess, culture. And then, as I got older, we still watched cable, and there was always commercials, especially around Halloween, that would have monsters in them, not just the monster cereal commercials.
Yeah, Halloween is definitely a big part of that.
Yeah.
If you remember, like the Dorito commercials and all the
like
They were always there.
Yeah, and there was always monsters or people dressed up, like portraying a monster for Halloween in those commercials, and they were just always kept alive. And like there would be so many Halloween specials on that time of year too, that it was just, it was not only part of Halloween, but for me, I always loved them. I loved watching the movies, and you get the VHS tapes, fairly cheap, or you'd rent them at like Blockbuster or your local mom and pop video rental place. And I just kind of grew up with that. And I was always drawn to the horror section, and I'd check out a little bit of everything, obviously, but I was always drawn back to the monsters. So I think that even though they weren't necessarily from my time, I never felt like they weren't necessarily. I didn't know that this had so far, obviously I knew that they were before my time, but I never realized that they weren't, there was so much more that I was missing out on, because it was just always it was always there.
Did they have like cable, like AMC Monster Fest, or was that going on when you were young?
Oh yeah.
And I remember Rhonda Shear's Up All Night would play all these like crazy, sorority babies.
I also watched that program.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like all the Hollywood chainsaw hookers and all these great movies, and you'd be like, this is great. This is just great stuff. So I think television had everything to do with it. I think for all of us, even though there's some age differences, it's like was
yeah. And Rich bringing up the rise of VHS. Oh my God! Like, as a kid who read Starlog magazine religiously, and then to be able to rent all those films I'd read about for 3-4 years in advance. That was insane.
I'll tell you, the one that was my Bible was one Christmas. My dad got me, because I had seen it in the bookstore. He got me Michael Weldon's Psychotronic Film Guide, and it was my goal to see every film in that. I poured over that during Christmas vacation, read it cover to cover, and I would go to the video store and just be like, "Do you have this? Do you have that?" And
you me same, man.
It was amazing, and I watched so much stuff. It was great. But I think, Andy and Amy, like you're saying, and all of us, TV was really a catalyst, or video or film. And in our generation, we didn't know that this was old during syndication. It was just, this is on TV 56 at 2:00 today. As far as I know, Gilligan's Island is a new show. I didn't know it aired 10 years ago or whenever it came on. Oh yeah, it's only until you grow older that you realize that it's old. I remember I had this same feeling. I showed my daughter Star Wars when she was a kid. She was about 4 years old, and then I took her to see The Force Awakens, and Harrison Ford shows up as Han Solo, and she goes, "Dad, why is he so old?"
Yeah,
because she thought he was 30 years old still, because she had just seen it on video. It's crazy.
You brought that up. Remember Far Out Space Nuts?
Oh yeah, love that show.
Bob Denver's not dyeing his hair anymore.
Yeah,
and as a kid, I couldn't.
And he's not combing it either.
Yeah, that's a given. But it was like, why has Gilligan got white hair? Like, it drove me crazy as a kid.
I just thought he dyed it for the character. That didn't register with me. I didn't say, oh, he's old. I thought he's playing a different character, and this one has white hair.
I loved that show. I loved all those, any of that stuff. I mean, that's what we ate it up. And I think today's generation, today's generation, I'm not complaining, but they have menus to choose from, and everything's bite-sized entertainment. And if they don't enjoy it, they can move on to the next 10 seconds of whatever they want to see. We had to watch. You'd watch something as a placeholder. You'd be like, I guess I'm going to watch this because it's the best thing on the 3 channels
and
right
we liked
now.
It.
And there's a cartoon coming up afterwards that I want to see, and then you all of a sudden be like, "Wow, I guess I really love Abbott and Costello," or something like that.
I really think you're right. I think that the thing, they try to bring back all these properties, and some of them just flatline, and you're like, yeah, because that was popular, because that was the best thing on that time slot at that time, but nobody cares about it anymore.
Right.
And then the true stuff that survives is the stuff that we're still passionate about.
Yeah, good point.
Really good point.
We had a brief intermission, but now we're back. We were talking about Holy Grails, and that kind of evolved into just how big of a collection do we want. So before we talk about the Holy Grail, I think that was interesting. I I believe space is more of a limiting factor than money. I mean, if you could buy a bunch of inexpensive toys if you just wanted to amass stuff. And of course, if you have excellent tastes and you want expensive things, then money is always a problem. But I'm feeling like it's not just money. I'm feeling like it's space. When I think, especially with new toys, very much so with new toys. Every week there's new stuff coming out. It's exhausting. But every time something comes out and people say, "Oh, I get that," I think, where am I going to put that? I've already got stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. Not only is there the money, but where am I going to put it? So before we'll talk about Holy Grails, let's just talk about where you are with your collections now, and how much more do you want? Are you you're good with where you are, you're fine, or are you really ambitious about building more? Do you have like an end game? I'll start. Andy and Amy, we'll start with you.
I mean, space is definitely an issue for us. We are in a very tiny apartment, so unfortunately, we really don't have much on display. But one thing that we've definitely kept in mind with collecting is, like, what's our favorite stuff? You know, what's the stuff that we can picture, like, when we do have, you know, some allotted space to really set this up, make it look nice. What's the stuff that's going to look good together, for one? What's going to fit in the space? You know, how's it all going to work? How much room are we realistically even going to have? Because obviously we're not going to have a mansion. So we try to scale down as much as possible. And sometimes we spend a little, you know, we buy things just kind of on a whim. And, you know, we set up at toy shows to kind of purge the collection a little bit to put more money back into the fund. But, you know, we try to limit it to mostly just vintage monster toys.
Yeah, I like well curated collections. When I see like a nice, beautifully well curated collection, it's just like, wow, like that's the most impressive stuff. So it's at the point where
don't look at any of this.
I think there's
sometimes what someone doesn't have says more about their collection than what they do have.
Yeah. And the thing is too with vintage, I mean, I pretty much, we only collect vintage now because you can go crazy with too much stuff, and there's still new discoveries. Like I know Rich is a big costume collector. I'm a big costume collector, and you start getting into the variants of things. It's to the point now where I've got like 30 Wolfman costumes because this one's got the blue hair. This one's got the orange eyes over here. This one's nose is a little different. It's like, so you can collect vintage by itself for your entire life and still not even get anywhere near everything you want, you know?
Rich, what do you think of that?
I would have to agree. There is no end necessarily. I mean, that's part of the joy of it, right? Is the hunt, trying to find new things. If you ever found the last thing, then, you know, my life's work is over. But yeah, the space is certainly a limitation. And I have fallen into buying new stuff because of there's this cool monster toy. They never had a Christopher Lee Frankenstein. I got to get that, or a Peter Cushing Van Helsing. You know, these are things that I've always wanted and I have to get, but I've limited that. I don't want to get new stuff and trying to focus more on.
How many of those do you want? For instance, for decades, there were no Hammer toys. And then suddenly there's starting to become a saturation of them almost. Not quite there, but we're getting there because you had the Mego figures, but you also had a lot of things that weren't really figural that all came out around the same year or two, like those ducks and, you know, weird stuff.
Right.
You had like the Tots Trick or Treat Studios mask. But then you have, of course, you've got the NECA figures they have a Dracula on the way, and I think they announced Peter Cushing, right? And they're going to make a whole line, obviously. And then you've got that like caustic plastic, expensive, high-end collector pieces. Right. And so I can see that how many Peter Cushings do you need, or how many Christopher Lee Draculas do you need?
Right, exactly. And that's what I've been asking myself as well, too, especially with, you mentioned NECA. So NECA, eventually I found out, I'm like, why am I doing this? So they would make Frankenstein. I'm like, I got to have Frankenstein. I love Frankenstein. Now he's a black and white Frankenstein. the exact same sculpt. Maybe they have a different hand or a couple of different props in there. And I'm like, well, I got to have that because now I need to, like Andy was saying, the variants. I got to have the variant. And then they kept doing that. And then I'm like, I'm just going down this rabbit hole where it's the exact same sculpt, the exact same mold, except it's a different color or a different paint scheme, and it's a new toy, and it just doesn't mean as much to me as something vintage. So I need to stop buying unless it's something that really speaks to me and I really, really want. Then I'm limiting that. It's the same with the costumes. Like Andy, it's you find something, and I'm the same way. I'm like, oh, that Wolfman has like an orange tint to his eyes. I got to get that. That's so cool looking. Or you come across stuff you didn't even know existed with the costumes, and you're like, yeah, I got to have it. And those, talk about storage, they're a real pain to store just because they're in boxes and they're bulky and you don't want to crush them and they're fragile. And it's tough. But yeah, I'm at the same thing where I need to thin out some of my collection for sure, because I did fall into the trap of buying newer stuff over the years along with vintage. And my goal is to eliminate a lot of the new and just keep the vintage type stuff.
And before we go to Brian, I might forget this point because what you just said registered to me because in the 90s, I purged a lot of stuff. But I used to have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection, and I had like turtles everything.
Oh, wow.
I had hundreds of turtles. I mean, like half the base was turtles. I don't know how that happened. I guess I just got addicted to it. And then I just sold it all off. And of course I sold it. Well, at the time, no one really wanted it. I mean, they had their day when they were new.
Right.
And then they were like, no one wanted it. And I was looking at it around the basement. Like, what am I doing sitting on these turtles? So I got rid of them. I sold, most of them, but some of them I just gave like Toys for Tots or whatever. And of course now they're like 300 each or whatever. They're crazy. And so I'm kind of in that situation with Monster High. I've got boxes and boxes of Monster High. And I've been thinking like, look at all the space this is taking up. Like, I feel like I should just purge the Monster High, but I think, I can see this now. It's just like with the turtles. If I do that, I'll be like, sorry later on.
I think Amy's probably the Monster High expert. She could tell you the values on those.
The funny thing is, because how Andy was saying he worked at Toys R Us at one point, I also was, just for a couple of years, just doing overnights, putting stock away, and I would always be the one in charge of the girls department, and I was putting away the Monster High dolls that are now, like, if I just knew, and like, I always liked them, and I'm like, I'm collecting my monsters. I'm trying to stay laser focused, especially with working at Toys R Us. I'm like, I'm working here to make extra money for Christmas time. I'm going to blow my whole paycheck on these things if I'm not careful. And it would have taken nothing, but in hindsight, I probably should have done it. Because now, like, I've been trying to avoid it all along because it's modern. But at the same time, they got me with the Creature from the Black Lagoon one.
See, that I bailed out before that era of Monster High started. Mm-hmm. I thought, like, when they stopped, like when they did like the families, the sisters and brothers and all that, then they quit for a few years. I thought, okay, this is my stop. This is where I can get off. So I didn't. So I made a point of not buying all those kind of high end collector editions because I thought, no, that's just going to lead to madness. Okay, but let's. I want to hear from Brian now about Brian. Where does your collection stand as far as the future? Are you finished? What are you doing with your collection?
I don't honestly know. I think that the channel and the magazine have given me this sort of like, I'll buy this and curate it for, document it for whatever I want to do, but it doesn't stay here forever. I'm kind of one of those guys who really wants to have a beautiful showcase, but also has like awful ADHD and, stuff is everywhere. And it's tidy to me, but probably not to everyone else. And yeah, I buy things that I like, and sometimes I keep them, and other times I try to sell them for as close to what I paid for them as possible. But, a good friend of mine, like I've lost some friends in the last couple of years, and I've had some friends who have some scares and stuff. They just kind of said to me, sometimes you're just kind of curating this stuff. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that has meaning to me. And then there's other stuff that I probably have to have a conversation with. To the point of new stuff, I think the major reason that I'm not so drawn to it, is my mindset, my personality is I don't like being forced to do things. I once read a book that said that I fall under the rebel mindset, which is not a good thing. It sounds cool, but it's not a good thing. It means you can't make me do it, and neither can I. So we don't like to be told what to do. So that's how I quit smoking. That's how I did a lot of things where I just realized, like, no, I don't want to be forced to go in there and buy things. So the conceit of new stuff is really tough for me. Although I will admit, Ray, I had to part with my collection of G.I. Joe Sergeant Savage. I had the complete collection in the 90s for no good reason. And I don't think anyone still wants that. So, you were on the ball with Turtles. I was picking the unloved G.I. Joe son.
Yeah, I was addicted to Turtles, and then I kind of got addicted to Monster High. I guess if I'm addicted to anything now, it's NECA stuff, which annoys me because I'm more self-aware now than I was about this kind of thing. So it bothers me in a way that I don't think it bothered me at the time I was buying the other stuff. But now every time I buy a NECA toy, I don't feel good about it. I feel like something's wrong.
Well, that's not a good place to be.
I know.
I don't think. But I agree. When I buy a Super 7 item, I don't want to take off the card because the card's too pretty.
Yes.
I'm like, what is this?
Because that's the thing. I've never been a mint in box guy for the most part.
Well, yeah, I have been for vintage, but new toys, they're more fun off the card than on usually.
And the Super 7, I fell off that bandwagon too, because I was like, they're just recycling the same creature figure, but he's Pepto-Bismol pink. Now he's see-through. Now he's got a glow in the dark.
He's got a new hat.
Now, yeah, and it was like, I'm like, why am I buying this over and over again?
I haven't bought a Super 7 toy in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, the card art was the same. Was the thing. I'm with you, Ray. I'm getting disillusioned with NECA, and I think to go back to social media, that has a lot to do with it because we see other people posting this stuff all the time, right? So there's that fear of missing out where you're like, well, damn it, everybody's buying these figures. They must be really cool. And you're just constantly on your radar now. If you just walked in a store and saw it, you'd be like, and you'd walk out and never see it again. But
except my friend Jason Lindsay puts it, and I always find this funny. He's like, where the hell are they putting all this? That's what he always says to me when he sees the new stuff coming out. Like, how can you buy like 8 new Turtles? Where are you putting them? Where do they go in your house?
Well, they're in the way. That's what they are.
Yeah. Well, I'm an ardent like display or not display, and right now, or get rid of it. Like display it or get rid of it. Because I like Shogun Warriors, and I purchased myself a perfect Raideen recently, but it's in a box. I don't have room for the box, so what do I do? It's weird. I don't want to part with that box, but it is a giant box.
Mm-hmm. I just randomly, I didn't intend to show this. I just by my elbow, I have this NECA figure that's down there because there's no place else for it to be. It's just sitting here. Because where else am I going to put it? So
it's gigantic too.
If you could see what's on the other sides of me right now, that's what it is. Yeah. These things.
Well, it's like, remember those gentle giant 12-inch Star Wars figures? It was like, who can have all those? You know what I mean? Like, do you have any kids? Do you have a spouse? Like, eventually those could take over your house.
I mean, I do get suckered in. There's a couple of the McFarlane Superpowers stuff that was just like, okay, I got to have, Blue Beetle and I got to have Brainiac's vehicle and stuff like that. That I was just like, all right.
I'm not immune.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not made of stone. Like,
No, that one hit me in a weird feels. I loved that comic in college, and when I dreamt of action figures, that would have been the style I would have thought of at that time. And when I saw those, I was like, yeah, I gotta.
Well, I can. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
The Bwahaha era, it got me in the feels.
Yeah, and to what happened, I think, but I think none of the new stuff probably speaks to us as much as the vintage stuff does. Even for Amy, who didn't, or any of us, all of us have collected stuff that wasn't from our era that we were alive or that we had as children, and it still speaks to us probably more than any brand new item, even if it's a new item with a retro feel or trying to recapture that retro feel, retro style item. I think it's the actual retro stuff or the vintage stuff that probably speaks to us all. And of course, I don't want to speak for all you guys, but I would imagine that's the case.
There is one exception, I have to say, to everything you just said, would be the NECA Trick or Treater Ben Cooper figures. I think that speaks to all of us just seeing them. It's like, if we were kids, we would have wanted those figures. As adults, we want those figures. They capture the ultimate nostalgia for so many different generations. That I think that's like the one thing that's come out. That's like.
So you're buying those?
Oh yeah, all bets are off.
I gotta admit, I thought I was immune to them until Shannon Stewart pointed out that the Dracula was the Collegeville Monster Squad Dracula, and then I was like, oh no, I have a mission. And I did find one. It was fun. Funny story. I met a guy at ZoloCon Migo Meet. He was telling me, yeah, I work at NECA and I worked on those figures. And I said, oh, blah, blah, blah. My wife and I were on a vacation trying to find those. And it became a mission and it was fun. And I didn't realize I was talking to Randy Falk.
Nice.
I just didn't put two and two together that...
He's one of the higher ups at NECA, right?
Yeah. He was one of the designers at NECA, and it's just like, oh my god, I can be oblivious sometimes. But yeah, it was still kind of a fun exchange because I didn't think I'd need any of those, and then that came out, and I was like, well, I was wrong,
If someone's watching this like 2 years from now, that we're talking about these little children figures wearing trick-or-treat costumes, and we're going to see one. There we go. There we are.
So I am not immune either, but I will be the devil's advocate in the room. I like these. I like that they copied the blue box, which is one of my favorite of the Ben Cooper boxes, the blue box monster box. They're not 100% accurate necessarily, like Brian said. They have the Collegeville Dracula on the Dracula costume, and he's also was used as a Monster Squad Dracula, which to me, I'm being comic book guy now.
Was that mask used as a non-Monster Squad Dracula?
It was used both as a Monster Squad Dracula and a non-Monster Squad.
Did they use mustard on his face like they did with the Monster Squad?
Because actually that, I don't know if you can see it, that Dracula mask back there with the blood kind of dripping from its teeth is what should go to the
Ben Cooper. Yeah.
The Ben Cooper. But it's fine because I know that Ruby's sort of encapsulated and took over Collegeville and Ben Cooper, and NECA now owns Ruby's. So they're just going through the old catalog. But to me, it was like, well, did someone not do their research, or did they just think it looks really cool? And
my impression is that I hate to put it this way, I don't think they care about it. I think that's too granular for them. I think they just want something that looks cool. I don't think they're planning it out. Like, we're going to mix and match these things.
Okay. They're just looking for the best styles, I think.
Yeah.
And, obviously it doesn't seem to affect their sales, but I get
these things blew up. They went crazy. And I think, so here's a question for you guys as collectors. And again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. You always have that feeling when you're a collector, you're like, and Andy probably too, like, right, I've been collecting costumes for years. And now everybody's jumping on the costume bandwagon with these figures.
Yeah, it's the band. It's
They're
the
like-
band you liked that's
Yeah.
now popular.
Right, exactly. And
Oh
you're
yeah,
like,
no, that's
it's sort of like I'm happy people are recognizing it, but at the same time, I'm like, where were
posers.
they all these years when I was toiling away, like,
Yeah.
and it's like, and don't you know that's a Collegeville Dracula on that man? Like, it's like,
I kind of felt that way about monsters in general, because back when I was, kind of writing about monsters, collecting monsters, like I said earlier, nobody cared about monsters. So now they kind of blew up. But Amy or Andy, were you going to say something?
I was hoping that I had them all before they blew up. I was really trying to get all the costumes before, because I kind of knew that was going to happen eventually. I started seeing Halloween like take off. All of a sudden, blow molds that were like $25, $30 were now in antiques, $60, $70. This is on the horizon. So I was kind of hoping I would get all the Ben Cooper costumes I wanted before it exploded and turned into a nightmare. But now Rich outbids me on all of them.
did you get them all?
No, there's still I discover new ones all the time. I'm like, where did this?
I know.
How can you
We probably
get them
are
all?
bidding
There's-
against each other. We don't even
there's
know it, but
hundreds
it's
of
like,
them.
Sure, I'm sure.
We're all costing each other a lot of money.
I know.
Exactly. But I'm telling you, there's this has probably raised it because you've got sort of like, oh well, maybe I should go look for that costume online because I bought the figure and I really like it. How much would it be to get the mummy costume? So you have sort of, Sunday collectors coming in and buying this stuff too and driving the price up on things. But
That's a good point.
it's crazy.
And when it gets really popular, you have the casual collector who's not really into it.
Right,
Just sees
that's what I meant to
something
say,
that maybe they can make money off it, or maybe it's the end thing to do. And later, maybe those people fall away, and then you have a bit of a dip before it starts coming back up again.
Yeah.
Amy and Andy, so do you both, when you buy like a new thing like that, is it both of yours, or like with these Ben Cooper figures, do you divide them up, or how do you decide whose they are?
You have a prenup?
Well, like when I was a kid, I had a little brother growing up, and we always had to have two of everything. And if not, we had to make very clear, like, this is my Han Solo, this is your Han Solo, this is my Frankenstein, it's your Frankenstein.
Don't touch it. Like,
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, there's some stuff. I think we just try
You
to
just buy
separate.
two.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's one that you think is awesome, you just buy a second one. I mean, I don't know how far down that line I'm gonna go with because
Mostly just like the newer
the
stuff,
original
yeah.
monster, the I guess wave 1 and 2 were the ones I thought were the best, and when I saw wave 3, I kind of went, and then I seen the wave 4, and I was like, so I don't really know that I'm gonna keep going with
Until they
them,
come out with a Wolfman.
But yeah,
Why no Wolfman? Why no Wolfman? That's
That's
one of
the Wolfman.
the holy bunch of monsters. You got to have the Wolfman. They did the Mummy. They did the Creature. They did Dracula. Frankenstein. No Wolfman.
So does
And instead
NECA,
they do
I'm sure they do,
Beetlejuice.
does NECA have a license to produce toys for the new Wolfman movie?
I hope it's not that one. If that's what you're showing.
Well, I'm just saying they might have guidelines in that license about what they can or can't produce as far as the Wolfman is concerned. So maybe they can only produce in a certain period of time a Wolfman based on that film.
Yeah, you may have a really good point there, Ray, because there's weird restrictions on licenses sometimes.
Oh, because they're making a new Wolfman film that nobody can do, like the Larry Talbot Wolfman, or
like what's the one I'm trying to think of that was like Star Trek. I think that's the most famous one where Mego was told, do not produce any Star Trek television series stuff anymore. Just focus on that big hit of a movie we're working on.
This is in the 70s.
Yeah, but that stuff still happens today. Mego wasn't able to talk about the classic Planet of the Apes license because they wanted to promote whatever that the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the last one.
Yeah, but Mego didn't make any Kingdom toys, though.
Nope, they sure didn't, and I'm glad they didn't. Because not to derail this conversation, but I find those apes very un-toyetic. And that's okay because I won't buy them anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're good movies, but like you said, I don't want a toy of those.
I really enjoyed the last film, but there's nobody I would need a doll of. None.
Yeah.
So I'm just speculating because it is very odd that they have not included the Wolfman, especially when he's on the box. But what reason could there be? That would be the obvious thing I would think of, that there's a new movie on the horizon. They're starting to promote that new movie kind of in odd ways that have not, I don't know how successful this promotion has been so far for this new movie, but they are starting to promote it.
I'd say it was not very successful right now.
So that might be why they don't want an older Wolfman toy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so what do you guys think of the way these NECA Halloween figures have been distributed? Like the marketing plan for these figures? Because that has been very controversial. Again, if someone's watching this in the future, that's been a topic of conversation among collectors for the last several months, is how impossible it is to get these things and why is it so impossible? And what are your thoughts on that?
I'm just going to tap out of this because I live in Canada and we don't get anything, and I don't know anything.
Well, I had pre-ordered the first wave because I knew it was going to be, when NECA put up the pre-order for it, I pre-ordered the first wave. But I did not order the Skeleton and the Devil. I just got the main monsters, the Mummy, the Creature, and Frankenstein. And then the two ones came out, Dracula and the Witch came out at Walmart as Walmart exclusives. And those were kind of tough to find. But then when I did hit my Walmart, they had a whole case of them there. So I bought a couple of those, and I have not been able to find Wave 3, the one with the Phantom. That's the one I want. But I did wind up ordering that from a Muck Time Toys. So, and I really have no interest other than the alien costume for the Wave 4 with the Gremlins and the Beetlejuice and things like that. And I think they're only selling that as a set, as far as I know. So it's kind of tough.
Yeah, they did have some individual aliens like for 5 minutes, and that was about it.
But it seems to be that way with all these boutique toys. It's been, I mean, Brian can probably speak to Mego, the stuff that the way the distribution there, and but NECA's the same way. You find out that something's out, and you just go to your Target and you keep checking that collectible section, and it's usually trashed, and there's
Yeah, and I just want to point out, like on the Mego side, they don't have the resources NECA has.
Yeah,
not by a country mile.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to that any more than I can. Like the Mego stuff is actually purchased by Walmart, sent to them, and then they distribute it. So Mego doesn't have hands on the ground, or feet on the ground. And I think NECA may have some merchandisers. I'm not 100% sure, but again, they can only merchandise what they get in.
Yeah, because I mean, I think any of us could speak to that. We go to any of these stores, and the collectible sections are either picked over or never stocked up, and you just got to hit it on that day when the guy went out there and stocked it up, and it's like, and stuff shows up. It's like it was the same way when I was hunting Migos when they first came out. The same way hunting NECA. Sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. It's
like for me, because I'm Canadian and I try to go to like Buffalo or Western New York. Well, that's where every Canadian goes. So it's like triple picked over. So there isn't even an attempt for me to try and find this stuff. You have to go to like deep into Pittsburgh to find this stuff.
Well, I think they really made it impossible too, where along with like what Rich said, I pre-ordered the first wave. Once I saw they were coming out, I'm like, all right, it's a Creature from the Black Lagoon. I gotta have this. But I think they've made it really impossible for people, and I think that turns a lot of people off because you have, FYE was able to get Wave 1, and they only got like a case, and that was it, but everybody had heard about that, and then Walmart got those two, and then Target got theirs.
Phantom
and then it's like once they were gone, and I mean, let's face it, scalpers bought them immediately because of, like the Creature from the Black Lagoon was a $20 figure. Yeah. It's now $175 figure. So if you walk in a store and there's 3 creatures, whoever the first person to see them is just going to buy all of them. So your odds of finding them are nearly impossible. And I think that's turned a lot of people off because everybody wants them, but just nobody can get them. And then now they're doing the exclusive one, and that's going to be a bloodbath. And it's just like, it's really made things, because I see it a lot of times. People will post like, you know what, I wanted these and forget it. And, I give up. I can't get Wave 1 that I don't want any of them. if I can't get the creature and the mummy, then I don't want none of them.
If I couldn't have gotten wave 1, I wouldn't be collecting them.
Exactly.
Well, I think of that 1701 lesson that like was just like the dagger through the heart of the Playmates Star Trek fad. If you guys remember, that was just a license to print money until they came out with those 1701 figures.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Does anyone here not know what he's talking about?
I've heard the story about the 1701 figures. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like 3 exclusive figures they were going to make, and you could only get them. And that, I was there for it. I never cared about any of it, but I witnessed it, and I witnessed just all of a sudden now all those Playmates figures were in blue tubs under people's tables for, whatever you had.
Yeah. One mistake can just spoil it all.
It was insane.
It's like a celebrity that says the wrong thing, and then they come, or releases a bad song or a bad movie, and I think, like Andy was saying about this exclusive, that's not going to be the last exclusive, I'm sure. And it's lucky. I'm going to try to get that skeleton, but it'll be exhausting 5 or 6 exclusives later.
Yeah,
and especially when they decide that one that everyone really wants to have, one that is essential, like a wolf man. They say, hey, we finally made a wolf man, and it's going to be available for 30 seconds if you're poised, to strike at your computer. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Or like when they get into Collegeville things, if they made an incredible melting man, I think that'd be a bloodbath with people who are into this stuff like we are, that, or creepy or eerie, or some of the ones that are like kind of legendary as costumes. Once they make those, like the alien that they're making, it was, as much as we don't like that wave, that one.
That's the one we want, yeah.
Right. Exactly. So when they start, I'm surprised the alien wasn't an exclusive. I was kind of predicting that it would be.
Just say never. They might make a glow one. And then
that's what they tend to do is it glows, or the next tail is going to have pigtails. It's like they're
changing the genders on some to make a variation,
right?
And that's going to be exhausting. That could be a whole other discussion about this collect them all mentality that I feel like we just got to not do that somehow, break out of that, because it's poison.
It's pretty easy. Like with the new stuff, I don't care.
That's because you have a rebel mentality, Brian Heiler.
Yes. I guess, yeah. No, I just mean in general, I can talk I love the Mego superheroes on the Krusky cards. And I got down to the 2, I was kind of Templeton and the Rat about them. They could be resealed. It didn't matter. But I just wanted a wall of them. And then it got down to the Green Arrow and the Shazam. And it's oh, no. I don't have, I didn't have that kind of money in 2008. And I certainly don't have that kind of money now.
Right.
And I just kind of justified it. All right, well, I'm not going to get there. It's still a pretty wall. But, it doesn't have the Green Arrow on it. I don't need a reproduction Green Arrow. There's no hole in my heart that needs to be filled by Shazam or the Green Arrow on that wall. And, I sleep well. I got to tell you.
I have problems with being a completist, and then so I get angry with vintage stuff. What it is, unless something new comes to light. There's this many characters. Okay,
yeah.
But with modern stuff, I get frustrated when I'm trying to collect a line and they start throwing curveballs like these exclusives and whatnot. That makes me want to stop collecting altogether. I have to wonder. I could get on a whole other tangent, but I feel like it's a bad marketing strategy. Like you're torturing your customers.
But they know what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do. Right? They're playing to our OCD mentality. They know that collectors have to have them all. So
I think we're talking about Super 7. I'm pretty much, they pretty much lost me as a customer. I don't buy Super 7 stuff anymore. It was because of this stuff. And NECA could lose me too. They're already kind of, even with this line we're talking about, they're all already kind of losing to me because I'm saying I don't want that 4th series with these fantasy characters. And if I buy that, then that kind of trains them people will buy those. Well, then here's another fantasy set.
Yeah.
Well,
What's interesting is the first wave was pre-order only. That was not going to be made available in stores. You could only order that through
which is
NECA.
bizarre.
And I think that went crazy. And it was right around San Diego Comic-Con that I think I got those figures, or they came out. I don't know, Andy, when did they come out? The first wave? It was this summer, wasn't it?
Summertime.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they were like, we have 2 extra ones, and those were immediately in stores. They were in the stores like the next week when they announced that they had the witch and the Dracula. So they had probably just said, let's see how well this does, how well it hits the collecting community, and I understand, especially with boutique companies, they have to say like, look, we're not selling to kids
those
anymore.
came so much like on each other's heels,
and then all of a sudden they have these 3 other waves.
They had to have had all this planned,
right?
In advance. You can't just pull this stuff out of nowhere. I mean, they have to.
Not that fast, yeah.
So there was a strategy, and I don't think I like their strategy. I don't like these sort of vaporware toys that they're announced and theoretically they're for sale, but you can't get them.
Yeah.
Like, you want to sell me? I'm here. I'm ready to buy your toy. Just where is it? Please allow me to buy your toy. And like, oh, sorry, it's too exclusive for you. You can't do it. And I've seen that happening more and more and more. And that's how that makes me want to walk away. Instead of making me more obsessed and more ferocious about trying to get it, that makes me like, maybe I should just stick with vintage toys.
Yeah, agree 100%.
Yep.
Well,
you got me.
I noticed that some of the companies have started doing a small window. Like you can pre-order it between this day and this day. Rather than that, it goes live at noon and we only have a certain amount and that's it. They're done once they're done. Which I don't know why the companies don't take that tact. Like you said, Ray, like, yeah, you don't want my money? Like it's like you could sell more of these if you sell it longer. Why do you only want to sell I mean, I guess maybe they only make a certain amount, but why do you only want to sell a limited amount and a handful of people are going to get them?
It doesn't make sense to me. I guess
it's a funny game we're playing with inventory these days, and the number one reason is stores aren't holding the inventory they once did. I can tell you that just from a retail perspective. If you want to put 500 monster dolls in on consignment, Walmart will love you, but doesn't mean they'll sell. So it really is a game of chicken in this time.
Now, I know the hour is very late, but can we touch on Halloween, the holiday, since we're talking about these NECA toys? Who here actually dressed up in any of these costumes as a kid?
Me.
I did.
For certain.
Yeah, I did. I did, but I think I was at some point more of an Imagineering kid with the makeup and stuff. And I like Topstone masks. So I started to shift out of the plastic vacuum form masks into that kind of stuff more. But I certainly grew up with the Ben Cooper.
Yep.
Does anyone here still, like, what do you guys do for Halloween?
When my kids were young, I went all out because the neighbor across the street would go all out, but it would all be like Michael Myers and Jason, which it isn't quite the same thing, and I didn't like it. So I tried to fight back by I built a 6 foot tall Frankenstein, which I call Brucey. And I actually had a 6 foot tall Lincoln mummy, which before he died had mice living in him. But
so you crafted a Lincoln mummy with
100% out of chicken wire and paper mache and the whole deal, and the gloves and everything. I found these big monster gloves that painted them white, and it definitely was the Lincoln mummy because I did the whole blood on him. But then the kids got older and didn't they didn't want to go trick-or-treating anymore, and then we moved to this new neighborhood. Not quite as there's a house about 2 blocks away that it just explodes with Halloween. Like, it's just insane, and all the other houses copy them, and they actually had a keg last year when I walked by the house. I almost joined in. So that's where kids from like 3 towns over come to trick or treat. So we don't really do anything anymore. And also, I have a dog that goes ballistic when the door knocks.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is the company that I ran in the early 2000s was a sticker company, and we had produced monster sticker packs. And I still have cases of them somewhere in the house. So I just put I have this really creepy guy store display from the Germany that I got years ago, and I make him to look like a what's that guy's name from the Trick or Treat movie? The little Sam. I make him to look like Sam every year, and he's got a bowl of those. And I know that if somebody steals Sam, I'll be okay with it. But it's just one of those things. And I just have a sign that says our dog barks too much. So that's what we do inside. My wife fills the entire house with blow molds and old. She's a vintage Halloween collector.
Oh my God!
Like mid-century.
It's more Halloween inside your house than outside.
Yeah. But basically, what happens is the basement sort of just moves to the main level, and I mean, like my wife is a massive fan of this stuff. Like she goes to there's some soap store she goes to that has like every year the soft soap becomes vampire blood. It's everything, and it's my favorite holiday. I prefer it to Christmas. It's my favorite month. We watch horror movies all month. It's my happy place.
How about Amy and Andy? What are you guys doing? First, you can talk about what you used to do and what you do now.
Just like growing up, just obviously went trick-or-treating. It was funny though, because I didn't get to grow up with the Collegeville and the Ben Cooper costumes. My mom was very much one of those we have it at home moms, and like a little too crafty for her own good, to the point that she deprived me of not being able to breathe behind a vacuform mask. But I was always very crafty, so I painted once I got old enough, I was always painting my face like different things. Like I'd be like a vampire, I'd be a zombie, it just, kind of generic type monsters.
Paul Stanley, right?
Yeah, I was doing the Kiss makeup for a couple years, and just putting on whatever little outfit I could, kind of DIY Halloween.
Yeah, I evolved into that from the Ben Cooper into something more like what you're talking about.
It was, I wish I could have been, more characters growing up, but my mom was always like, oh no, I'll just, make you into a witch with stuff we have around the house. I'm like, I don't want to. We did that last year, but didn't really have much of a say in the matter. But now as an adult, I always buy Halloween costumes. Sometimes we go places for Halloween. Other days other years it falls on kind of a, an odd day of the week where it's not really practical to go, say, a Halloween party. Like this year we might go, there's this party going on, I think, in New York City that we might go check out that's on Halloween night. So hopefully it's
the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, does it count if it's November 1st? Is that too late?
No, that's it. You can carry it over for
yeah,
sure. November
definitely.
1st. I went as a little kid. I mean, Halloween has always been my favorite day of the year for sure, by far. Like it far surpassed Christmas. I couldn't wait for October. I couldn't wait for all the monster movies on TV and the haunts and the hay rides and the, where I grew up. We had Spooky World not far away, so I would go to Spooky World, and ride the hay rides and watch Bobby Boris Pickett sing the Monster Mash. And so it's like everything was Halloween. So now it starts a little earlier. It starts in September, and it carries on for sure into the very beginnings of November.
Well, I started in September.
Yeah. But the haunts
get mad.
And the fun stuff. Now there's so many of them. I mean, when I was a kid, you only really had Spooky World. But now every town has
multiple
a haunt. Cities have haunts. It's a huge thing now.
America's favorite theme park, Spooky World. That was there.
I love them.
I mean, you got a channel devoted to dark ride. So, I mean, you must be, I'm thinking you'd be really into
kind
of a live attraction experience for Halloween.
Absolutely. I mean, the shows, the events, even now there's places, like there's a place up in New Hampshire called Fright Kingdom that a friend of mine owns. And he's about to open a new dark ride, and we're going there to visit that and the haunt and the. I love that it's become such a big thing and a big deal because it's more to enjoy.
Yeah.
And it does stink if you're a collector because now you got to pay way more for stuff. But I love that people have embraced this so much, and it's become. I personally think it's probably become the biggest holiday.
Definitely.
I mean, at least from what I've seen, where it's almost universal.
Yeah.
It's become this universal loved pumpkin
Well,
spice
day. It's a holiday that everyone can enjoy. It doesn't matter. For the most part, it doesn't matter your religious background. You don't have to be, close with your family to enjoy it. I know a lot of people, nowadays have had, they have rifts with their family that prevents them from enjoying Christmas or, Hanukkah. Like
there's no sadness involved in Halloween.
Yeah,
it's just kindness. You're giving strangers candy.
Exactly.
Well, but also at Christmas, you kind of are obligated to give gifts.
Yeah.
Halloween, if you spend anything, really, you're giving yourself a gift. You're buying, stuff for Halloween. I think being collective.
No, I think you're wrong. I think you're also buying things to give to people you don't even know, like
candy, though.
Candy, yeah. No, I still love the gesture.
And Brian also brings candy whenever he sets up.
Yeah, no, that's
okay.
because I bring them my special Canadian candy.
They're so good. We're eternally grateful.
That sounds suspect
candy.
right there. I bring my special Canadian candy.
What is this special Canadian
Now you're getting searched at the border next time around.
You know what? That is an eye-rolling thing when they find that at the border. Oh, good. Yeah. Candy bars. Great.
Well, Rich, what about you in Halloween?
It was like everybody here. It's my favorite holiday. It always has been. I think any monster kid is going to tell you that Halloween is their favorite holiday. Same thing. I've started in September. I really have the spirit this year. I always loved trick-or-treating. I actually, to be honest, I only wore 2 boxed costumes as a kid. One was Planet of the Apes warrior, and the other was a Wolfman, a Ben Cooper Wolfman. Other than that, I was, like you, Ray, making my own costumes, rubber masks, things along those lines as I got older. You remember that thing called the face? It was sort of these latex appliances you could glue to your face and things like that. I did a lot of those. And even when I was in college, I would go to Halloween parties and dress up. And when my wife and I were married before we had kids, I would dress up to answer the door, decorate the house, things like that. And I dressed up with my daughter when she was younger. She no longer wants me to trick or treat with her now. She goes out with her friends. So I stay at the house. Me now, Rich. There we go. So I still dress up. I dress up every year, decorate the house, watch monster movies, watch horror movies. Last year, the big thing was when my daughter came back from trick or treating, is we sat down and we watched John Carpenter's Halloween together. I felt she was old enough to see it, and it worked. It scared her. She liked it. She enjoyed it. So it was a proud dad moment. But yeah, I've just always loved Halloween. The whole spirit of it. The whole month of October. Fall is my favorite season out of all the seasons. Me too. It's just there's something about it that I enjoy. It's. I'm not a summer guy. I don't like humidity, and in winter I don't like shoveling snow. So fall is it for me.
I'm definitely a fall guy, and yeah. So Halloween, of course, Halloween is my favorite holiday. I mean, that goes without saying. And this time of year, well, the time we're heading into now is my favorite time of year. Now, I don't decorate that much anymore. I used to try to put big stuff in the yard, stuff. So I live with my 84-year-old dad. So that there's something, as far as what I will or won't do, it has to be, that tempers things a little bit. But also this neighborhood is, it's not a Halloweeny neighborhood.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, so the neighbors across the street are kind of into it, but on Halloween night lately, last few years, you look down the block and there are no porch lights on. There might be one way down there, and there's only a handful of kids that come to the door. So it's kind of depressing on Halloween night. Now I remember even maybe 10 years ago, as recently as that, there were lots of kids. I think neighborhoods go through this cycle. Mm-hmm. And where the new families move in, and younger families, and they have kids. And so for a few years, there's lots of kids, not just Halloween, but just playing around. And those kids get older and they move out, and it takes a while for it to cycle around. But, you know, with the housing market the way it is, it might take longer than usual for that to happen. But I'm hoping if I stay in this area long enough, I would eventually see it cycle back and have more younger families and kids again. Now, I have friends in other parts. I live in the St. Louis area. I have friends in other parts of St. Louis that have like 100 trick-or-treaters. And so if I say, oh, Halloween just isn't what it used to be, they'll say, oh, wow, I've got tons of trick-or-treaters where I am. So I'm really thinking about maybe going to a friend's house to try to experience Halloween, because I like the kids coming to the door. I like that experience, and I like the decorations, and I want that experience. And I'm feeling kind of deprived on this block in this neighborhood. It's not what it used to be, but I kind of take Halloween into myself in that I will watch horror movies more than I usually do, and I'll drink pumpkin spice lattes and pumpkin this, pumpkin that, and I'll try to do some fall activities, and I'll try to organize like a trip to a haunted house, not a real haunted house, like, you know, an attraction, or do something else like that. Go to like a ghost tour, or maybe like a spooky music concert or something. I'll go out of my way to try to do Halloweeny things from like late September through October. So that's how I sort of celebrate Halloween. Also, having this channel helps in that my show, and starting it up again in October and having Halloween themed episodes, that's kind of a Halloween observance, and it sort of helps me to feel like I'm having a Halloween experience. But I certainly, it was when I was growing up, it was like the scene out of E.T. with, you know, except at night, not in the daytime, but just kids filling the streets everywhere you look, just, you know, hundreds of kids everywhere. Every single house had the porch light on. It was a big thing, and I don't think it'll ever be like, is this in my area? It'll never be like that again, I don't think. But
did you guys ever get like, we used to have like neighbors who would do an act like, Igor, come and give them chocolate, you know?
Yeah.
And like we had people that would try and scare us. I remember the coolest thing ever was there was this dude that lived like next door to my best friend's house, and he had that Fonzie apartment above. And we went up to his place, and he was dressed as Leatherface, and he had a chainsaw running, and he gave us candy, and it was just like those are like my favorite memories of Halloween, you know?
Yeah, we had that. We had the houses that would play the spooky records through the window, and they'd have the strobe light on, and you go up, and somebody would come out with like a monster mask, and it was just like Ray said, you're roaming the streets with everybody's in a costume, and half the part was just seeing what people were dressed as was so exciting. Who's he? Oh my god, I didn't even know that was a costume, and that's why I'm so in love with these boxed costumes, because I just have those memories of going down the street and seeing waves of kids wearing them, and you go to people's houses. And when I got older, when I was in high school and I wasn't out trick-or-treating, I would do that, and I would hide under a big pile of leaves in front of our house, and the kids would come up the walkway, and I'd come bursting out, and I had this monster mask on. And kids to this day that are older are still like, you used to scare the shit out of us. Sorry, you used to scare the crap out of us every Halloween. Like that was terrifying going to your house. It was like, there's something
I
so
was
joyous.
that guy for a while that, 15, 20 years ago, I would dress up as the Crimson Ghost. And I wasn't a Misfits fan. I was a fan of the cereal.
Yeah.
Yes. And I had the music, like, you know, spooky music and sound effects. I had decorations. I had the kind of lights off behind me, and they knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and I kind of, in that outfit, creep around the corner and creep up to them. I wouldn't say anything, and I'd have the skeleton gloves, and I'd slowly give them the candy, and I wouldn't utter a word, and I had like my eyes blacked out behind the mask, and they were like, and then I experienced, like, I did it long enough that I had the experience of dads bringing their kids like young dads bringing their kids and saying, "Okay, this is the house. This is the house."
Oh yeah.
And I guess I must have been doing this longer than I thought, because I guess that maybe during one of their last, Halloween years, trick or treating, they were exposed to that, and now they're a young dad, and now they had their kid. This is the one, and this is what happened.
Enjoy my trauma.
Yes,
He's still here.
yes, but I haven't done that.
That guy is still here.
Yes.
The greatest thing that my kids experienced, I think, was just they're like on one corner of a cul-de-sac in our old neighborhood was a guy with a flashlight to his face going, "Do you dare come to my front door?" And that was it. He was just narrating everything with this booming voice. And I was like, you are the greatest. Like Halloween, like this is so meta and hilarious.
Behold the precarious flagstone steps.
Yeah. Will you make it?
Do you dare open the creaky screen door?
When I was a
Careful,
kid,
it's going to fall off the hinges.
He's just sitting in a lawn chair on the front deck.
well, when I was a kid, there were houses in the area when I was growing up that had little makeshift haunted houses. So they wouldn't just give you candy; they'd invite you in. And they'd have like a little haunted house. You have to go through. They'd have some. You have to close your eyes and reach into something, and feel like there'd be something spooky in there. And I remember one of those. There was a few different rooms, and people and witches, and have like a cauldron. But what I'm thinking of, the final room, they had an actual coffin in the living room, and they had a strobe light, and they had a guy in tuxedo. They had the coffin open up, and the guy rise up with the strobe light effect, and that. I was really little, and that scared me so bad I ran out of the house.
Yeah.
So that was a very effective little homemade haunted house. Well, they weren't all like that, but people would go through the trouble of doing something like that back then. I don't know if they still do stuff like that.
Probably liability reasons they don't do that now.
we have a place down here called Kids Safety Village, and it's like a I don't know, like a 1/3 size downtown. So you're a giant walking through this, and they're trying to teach kids about traffic. And every Halloween they open it up to kids, and there's like, the little cars they show them how to use. There's all in a drive-in theater, and there's local teenagers dressed as zombies. And I have this wonderful footage of my daughter and I going through the haunted house where she completely loses her mind to a 12-year-old with a widow's peak painted on his forehead coming out of the coffin, and I'm laughing, and then the video turns like, because she's really crying.
Yeah, I made some kids really cry in my outfit. Like, yes,
not at Halloween. Just
just Easter,
random day of the week. It was.
Well, no, I'm talking about Halloween, but I also went to like a Halloween party that was a kids party, and I don't remember. Well, I had a reason to be there, but I was in my outfit. I might have been one of the people organizing it. I did organize some community Halloween parties back in the day, but I was in that same outfit because my mom, she passed away many years ago, and one of the last things she did at my request was make this Crimson Ghost outfit. So it has a sentimental meaning.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. That was like, really the final weeks of her life. That was like a project that kept her busy. She just wanted to do something nice for me. She knew I liked this character on it. So that's why that became a thing, wearing that costume. But I was at this community party, and I was doing my really very, serious act. And there were kids crying and running. And then one of the people organized had to come to me and say, "You need to stop that, because it's really scaring the kids." Okay. And one kid came up to me and said, "You're mean." And I said, "Oh, okay." Okay. I wasn't saying anything. I was just in character. I was just lurking around. So I thought, okay, I don't know my own strength. I need to tone it down. But let's talk about one more thing. We'll wrap it up. I think you know what this is going to be. That we're going to talk about our Holy Grail toys, and that'll be the last thing. So, switching from Halloween, let's all go around and talk about, as collectors, what is our holy grail monster toy collecting item? What is your holy grail? I know what Amy's is. Let's start with Brian.
Crap. I don't know personally. My holy grail monster item is something that, like, I feel very content. Yeah. That's a tough one for me. You know what? Can I go in last?
Okay. Let's go to Rich.
So my holy grail item is a Halloween costume. So we're still in Halloween. I have numerous other grails I want, but this is the thing that I really want. It's the Halco Wolfman costume, because it is close to the Larry Talbot Wolfman from the movie. It is one of the earlier pieces, one of the first Wolfman costumes, if you like will. This? Yeah, I mean, I know that's from Abbott. I think it's from Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman is what the actual picture is from, and the mask is very similar. But it's just there's something about those early Halco costumes that their graphics on them, the way they look, they're just it's awesome, and it's an incredibly impossible piece to find. But that will probably be my grail at this moment.
Does it have to be in a box?
I will take it without a box because I have bought plenty of costumes without the box because that's the only way I've been able to get them. And oddly enough, sometimes the boxes show up later on in weird lots, because moms would mix and match they'd have the box for some other costume and throw a princess costume inside it or something like that because the other costume got lost. I've had to piecemeal stuff together. Believe me, it's crazy.
I know a lot of viewers want to see Billy, but he's here, but he just won't jump up on the table anymore. He's right there, but I wish he would jump up once in a while, but take my word for it. He's down there. All right, let's go to Andy. What's your holy grail?
See, that's tough because the ones that I have are all kind of like on the same line as each other. You have most of them. Like the Hearted Creature AHI is an absolute holy grail because just that pink and one that has all the paint on it would be amazing. That.
So you're talking about there's some confusion. The wide waist, which is what in the 90s I would call the male, because what I would have called the female has a thin waist, has wide hips, but a thin waist, and the bendy arms. You're talking about like that, right?
Yeah.
But on a card.
On a card, yeah. I have them loose, but something about yours, I've watched that episode at least 100 times and cry every time. It's like watching old Yeller.
It's the hardest one to get.
That one, the Renzi Mobile, and then like Rich, the Halco Wolfman. I'll tell Rich a funny, a little sad story. I like to torture myself and look at completed listings on eBay. I do this, but I just like doing it to see what I missed.
I've done that too.
And I saw last October somebody had listed the suit for the Halco Wolfman for $24.99. Buy it now, and I was devastated over this.
Awful, right?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Just those and the creepy, eerie Ben Cooper costumes. So I know that's 5 of them, but those would be like top 5. Those are all on the same level. All really hard to find. Super.
Those are good.
Yeah.
Those are good.
I've got a list of those too as well, but the Halco Wolf is right at the top.
That's such a beautiful.
Now, I don't have all your holy grails. Mr. Rich over here there's a few of those holy grails in this fellow's collection too. Just outing him there.
I would have to say you have mine because when I think about it, the number one thing I would want is the Blood Island Jiggler.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it's okay. So I've been asked if I would allow that to be recast, not by Joe Schmo, by someone proper. And I said no. I mean, I don't think they like that answer, but I said no. They will not. No, I won't be part of that. No. That's I didn't expect that. I mean, I know you love Blood Island movies like I do, but I didn't know that was like your holy grail.
Well, I mean, I've had good luck in this life, and it's sometimes just about like things that it's personal. Everybody's collection is personal and different, and there's some things I don't own in the box or on the card that I just don't like for some reason, my inner logic just doesn't need them. But that Blood Island Jiggler, it's a 3D representation of something I love. So I'd love to have that.
I'm very happy that I have it. Believe me, it was a big deal for me to get that.
Oh yeah, no, I can only imagine. But if you ever find anyone else selling one, send them my way.
Okay. When I got that, I got a couple of private messages, like 2 private messages by other people who have them. It was like a secret handshake, like oh, you're in the club now, kind of thing. And so I know mine's not the only one out there. They obviously don't want to be known because it was private message.
I need to get into this, whatever this is, this Eyes Wide Shut society that has their
jiggler people. Super creepy.
How do I get in on this?
just a
back room first. You got to go into the back toy room.
Hey, you know what? I'm kind of a fan. Let's hear this out.
Well, let's go to Amy though. I want to hear about her Holy Grail.
The funny thing is, I definitely have things that would be considered far more rare, but it's the AJ Monster, Renzi, or the AJ Renzi Monster Mobile. It's just eluded me for some reason. I just, I have a Dracula paint and pencil set that it's, as far as I know, is like people that share their collections. It's the only one out there, and I still can't find one of these things. So
it's funny. 2 of those came up for sale. I don't know if it was last year or the year before I saw them. Different colors, too. Like, they come in different colors. It was the same guy selling them, too. He's like, I got another
came
one.
in different colors?
I believe so, yeah. I think it was... Amy might know better than me, but maybe I'm misremembering it, but I remember the guy selling
the
them.
little monsters were different colors, I think.
Monsters were different. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's always like a buy it now and I miss it, or just something always comes up or like I'll like fall asleep when the auction's ending. Like
I don't even know what one of those would sell for now. I haven't seen one.
I don't know, but I'd probably overspend on it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get it.
I think
they all right
on Grails. I think they would overspend.
Like one item that you're just like, all right, I'll pay a little extra. I want it. I've been chasing it for a while and it's driving me crazy. But that's
crazy, yeah.
Well, and so as far as me, I mean, I'm kind of philosophical about this, that for the most part, I don't have holy grails like I used to. I kind of feel like if I don't have it by now, then what difference does it make? But also, I'm kind of starting to see, not to be ghoulish, I'm starting to see the end of the road coming a little closer.
That.
Yeah. So I'm starting to like, is that where that's not really my priority. Like I should have other priorities right now. Like I should be coming in for a landing, not taking off and trying to get to a new stratosphere. But there's still things that I'm interested in, particularly since I have this YouTube show. There's been several things I've bought because I wanted to show them on the program.
Hello.
If I have like a set of like 10 items and I've got 8 or 9, but there's 1 or 2 I'm missing, it's usually the most expensive one. I feel like I can't do the episode unless I get the complete one. I need to show it all. So that sometimes leads me to buy things that maybe I would have been at peace with otherwise if I didn't have that motivation. So I guess the thing that comes to mind, and if I keep thinking, I'll think of different things, but in the genre of toys would be the Imagineering Incredible Melting Man makeup kit. And there's been one on eBay at a very high price. I think it's $2,500. It's been on eBay for a while. I guess if anyone were going to buy it, they would have bought by now. I don't think that guy is going to go down on it. But the fact that it's there kind of dilutes the mystique a bit.
Yeah.
Because it's right there. I mean, how you say it's rare? Well, I don't know. It's right there. You just had the money to buy it. Yeah. But that's the only one I know that's been available in recent years. There's if I had more money maybe I'd go crazy one day, and but I just can't do that. So those things just don't turn up. But that's something, when I think about Holy Grail, that's one of the first things that pops to in my mind. I really wish I had that incredible melting man makeup kit from Imagineering. And like getting a little, because that's kind of a Halloween item. There's some top stone masks I don't have, like an original Keith Ward. I've got 2 shock monsters, a white hair and a blue hair. I wish I had a black hair Keith Ward vintage shock monster. Kirkama has one, but I don't have one.
Oh, let's not compare ourselves to others.
Yeah.
At some point, he's going to have to sell his collection.
I was trying to get the one he bought, and that's why I didn't get it, because I couldn't. Yeah, so he got it. But anyway, and I can only imagine if my offer didn't move the guy, then I can only imagine what he must have offered. Woohoo! But anyway, and there's a couple other top stones. That's almost a different genre. So I think as far as action figures, I've always, since they came to light, I've wanted the Tomlin Glow Yeti on a card, and a couple of them have turned up. I had
one.
Yeah, I've got the Famous Monsters Legend standard one on a card, and I had my loose one from childhood, but I really like that glow one. I like the card art. I like the portrait of him on there. I just like the whole package, the whole thing. And it's come up a few times, but I've just never been able to step up tall enough to get it. But it's probably more realistic that someday I would end up getting that than that Melting Man, unless the guy who's got that, buy it now, unless he decides to come down on that. But so that's that Tomland. I know I'm never going to have all those other Tomland, glow monsters, probably loose or carded. I've got a loose Mummy, and I'm lucky to have that. I'm not going to have a loose Wolfman, or I just can't. I can't afford that, and certainly can't afford carded ones. But if there's one that I would really make an effort to go after, would be the Yeti. That has a kind of a sentimental Yeti stuff. Bigfoot stuff has a sentimental value to me. So, I could see someday, shelling out some money to get a nice carded Tomland Glow Yeti. So that would be my Holy Grails. But, Holy Grails toys don't really mean as much to me now as they did 20 years ago. I do feel the fever kind of breaking on that. Not that I'm stopping collecting, but it's not. I feel like there's other things in life that are, higher priority.
Well, these things, there's an economic term for the law of diminishing returns, meaning your first car is your favorite car, and right now I'm car shopping, and it's like the worst thing ever. I just don't want to be there. And I think that, even with our hobbies, we have a breaking point where it's just like, I feel, and I'm not, trying to brag, but I feel like very blessed and happy and content. And now it's just finding neat stuff as opposed to stuff I need.
Yeah, I think I'm looking for the stuff I want, though, is out of. No, you're right, Brian. Not like out of necessity, like I have to have this to live, but it's something that I love and I want to have as part of my collection type thing. I think it's neat. It's something I've been hunting for or whatever, because I don't know, I've never been one of the collectors that's like bragging rights, like, aha, I got this and you don't, like that type of thing. I literally buy something because I like it or I love it.
Oh yeah,
that's the reason why I want to go after it, and I think that's probably the same for everybody in this room, but. It's I mean, I'm getting the same way as you start to say, as you get old, you're like, whoa, I'm never going to read all those comic books again. Why do I have them hanging around? Like I couldn't go through and read every single one. It's time to clean them out at some point. And it's just, you do start to think about thinning out. It's funny. I was in a comic book shop a few years ago that I go to quite a bit. And the guy was talking to me about cowboy comic books, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, stuff like that. And then for years, you couldn't get them. They were super high priced. Everything was super expensive because all the guys that grew up in that era bought them and held on to them. Then all these guys retired or started dying, and the market is flooded with them, and they're worth like nothing. And I wonder if it'll be the same thing for some of the stuff that we're collecting here now. You know, that at some point, AHI monsters will be, you know.
I think horror and monsters are slightly bulletproof in that they have multi-generational appeal,
Right?
but only to a point. I think the prices and all this stuff is going to come down. It's not going to be worthless because there's still going to be younger people who want. So there's something about horror that transcends generations. But I do think you're going to see, there's going to be a decline in value as us old folks retire or spending power goes whatever. We just, we're 6 feet under.
Yeah, way past our bedtimes.
Come on, we're all creatures of the night.
Oh no, I'm sleepy, guys.
if I come back, if I can come back to life, I will. I'll be like, ha 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 ha. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
So I think we will wrap this up because I'm nearing because you have to, when you do the Zoom-inies, it's for a certain period of time. So we're nearing the end of that. I don't want us to get cut off. But does anyone want to have any brief final words before we say goodnight?
I definitely one question for the future. If we were to do this again, a Monster Kid gathering, I would love to know what everybody's most, like a costume they wish existed. Okay. Is something I was wondering about.
The what if costumes? Yeah.
No, yeah. I can super answer that, but I'll wait.
Yeah, for that.
I've got a long list. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do something that's really squarely Halloween that we could upload on Halloween or something. We could talk about that later.
I'm down to do that. Yeah.
We could talk about that. Could be a topic for that.
Yeah.
But I will say that it's been awesome. You guys are, all three of you are like titans in the hobby, and we're kind of like, you are titans in the hobby. And
we've seen our washboard abs.
That's why
I'm hardly.
It's,
you don't want to see below this camera line. It's like, I need to do some.
It's a rare thing that, to have guys that are titans in the hobby that share this information. For a long time, there was almost a lot of gatekeeping going on, especially UMA all the time. And it was like, you barely got to see photos of things. And you guys, Brian he, with the magazine will show like, hey, look at this. And then Ray's got the Basement of Horrors, like, hey, look at this. And Dr. Durant's Sanctum, like, you guys show the things. I was so used to years where people didn't share their collections. Everything was hidden under lock and key, and you only heard about, hey, this might exist. And so it's awesome that you guys do what you do and bring this information out to people. So
well, thank you. And there's still some of that to gatekeeping, unfortunately, but I appreciate that.
I think, the reason why buy this stuff if you don't want to share it. That's why my reason for doing the channel was to share the stuff, and because my family's not interested in hearing about this stuff that I have. It's junk to them, and I like to share it with people and showcase it. It gives me a chance to actually play with the toys or showcase the costumes or bring them out or whatever. And it's a way for me to connect with other people that love the stuff as well. And that's the reason why I do it. I mean, I'm hardly a titan. I have a very small but loyal following. That's about it.
You've carved a niche for yourself for sure, and it's growing. And Amy and Andy, you also are definitely building a brand I think was going to grow.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, my wife watches you guys, and it was independent of me. She was like, "Do you know these guys?" I'm like, "I'm in the next episode," and it just kind of made her laugh.
Yeah, I want to say, if someone asks me about, hey, Ray, do you watch this TV show? You ought to check it out. Oh, yeah, I'm in the next episode.
Yeah. Well, she just, she loves mid-century Halloween, so, and dark rides. So you had her at hello, but it was just kind of funny that, she stumbled on you guys independently.
As long as no one's in the next episode of Dateline.
Yeah, or to catch
We
Predator.
don't want that. That's still on?
It's on.
See, I don't even watch regular TV anymore. I don't know what's on.
I don't either. My
Is it
mother
on
watched.
after Jag and Diagnosis Murder, Grandpa?
It's on after the Fall Guy.
After Matlock.
I have no terrestrial TV anymore. It's all streaming. Which I hate because I miss MeTV. I like to watch Spenguli, and you can't get him streaming anywhere. So
That's the only thing I watch on MeTV is Spenguli.
yeah.
METV's great.
See, before we get into a whole discussion about Spenguli, we probably ought to say goodnight. So
Save him.
We'll save him.
yes. So thank you everyone for coming. I think this was a great discussion.
This is fun.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. I appreciate it. You're all fantastic guests, fantastic people, fantastic collectors with wonderful perspectives. And I think this was a really good format that I'd like to try again
Yeah,
in
definitely.
the future.
Oh, I'm down. Yeah,
Definitely. It was a lot of fun. Nice to talk to you guys.
yeah, this was terrific.
Yeah.
And the people watching, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll be back on this channel for more Basement of Horror. Until next time, the one who dies with the most toys is dead.
Not it.